Honk honk everyone, and welcome to Squawking Dead, your number one source of squeezing every bit of analysis juice until you're sick of analysis juice. Our website has been overhauled 6,000 times in the last week, and I think we're finally settled on a version that's passable. Head over to squawkingdead.com and give us your take on it via email at squawkingdeadpodcast@gmail.com. On our last episode, we left off with the plan working, for the most part. Our team, now permanently labeled AWK by Eugene, Alexandria Hilltop Kingdom, managed to prevent the Saviors from getting their hands on some major firepower, held the Walkers into position at the sanctuary, and even managed to wrangle themselves some Savior hostages. Yeehaw! But as Rick finally approaches the junkyard gang with Polaroids that he and his team have taken of their victories, the sons of bitches done him Daryl style, stripped him down and threw him into a hole to wait an unknown fight. We now pivot over to the sanctuary, where Eugene is tasked with the very important duty of saving the Saviors. And in large part, that's what episode 7 of season 8 of The Walking Dead centers around. And we couldn't be more drawn in. As always, I turn to my partner in crime, the double to my trouble, an idealized version of my doppelganger, Harold.
Hi. Where to start? Let's see. I think this is a very interesting episode, Eugene-centric episode, which honestly, I find them to have been pretty interesting when they center around Eugene, because he's such an interesting character. I've said this before, and we've talked about this. Everybody wants to imagine if the apocalypse happens, they'd be Daryl. No, most people would be Eugene. I'm sticking by that.
And we discover kind of like the reason why, too. Why they would be a Eugene.
Why you would be a Eugene, yeah. The logic behind it makes sense. So it was really interesting to see Eugene's point of view and where Dwight's coming from. We saw more recklessness from Daryl and Tara, too.
Daryl.
So, Daryl.
Yeah, in my notes, basically all the scenes where Tara and Daryl are in, it's just labeled Daryl. I just couldn't even bother with Daryl. Oh my God. Daryl, Tara, Rosita, and Michonne. I was just like, Daryl. That's good.
Daryl, exactly. Their behavior, man.
Tara more than anything, I think. She really eggs Daryl on.
She did egg him on. Like, no, we can do it. We can handle it. It's like,
come on, let's do it. Come on.
Yeah, I'm like,
John.
I don't understand that at all. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't think this is a good plan. And Michonne and Rosita, finally came to their senses. What? Not Daryl and Tara. And, we all saw what they did. And, Rick looked pretty shocked when he realizes what happened. So,
we find out Rick does leave the crutches of the junkyard gang, the trash hipsters.
So bizarre.
But not without some strangeness and some terrification.
God, they're just so bizarre, aren't they? They're so weird.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that, because there's just so much to unpack there. Not as much as Eugene, though, I have to admit, which I'm glad for.
Yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to ask was, have we ever really had, besides the episode where Eugene puts I think it was the glass in the gas tank or the sand or whatever it was in that bus they were trying to use to get to DC? Have we ever really gotten a Eugene-centric episode? I don't think we've ever really gotten. We've gotten character episodes in past seasons before, here and there, but I don't think we've ever seen as much solitary character episodes as this season.
Not as much as this season, for sure. Like, this season is really the first time that we've really explored Eugene as a character and his person, because he always was basically second fiddle to Abraham, to Rosita. Like, he was just kind of there. So we never really ventured much into, well, what's Eugene about, Yeah. And so now, finally, this season, we are getting that, because basically, Negan pumps him up. Like, I don't know if I necessarily believe Negan in the kind of things that he tells him about, like, how magnificent he is and how he's the second most important person here. I don't know if he necessarily believes all that, but he definitely does a good job of basically pumping him up and, like, feeding his ego and just making him feel that he is an important factor. And totally benefits Negan, totally. And so the character of Eugene is getting a lot of attention. He's getting attention from the episode, and in the episode he's getting attention from Negan. Like, he isn't just a nobody. He isn't just like a background player anymore. He's like a formidable figure. And I feel that he will definitely play a big factor in the mid-season finale, especially when he has that conversation with Dwight, and Dwight mentions about having basically blood on your hands. I just feel that that's going to come back. I just feel that was kind of an ominous conversation.
Yeah, and it does kind of hail back to what Dylan, as I found out. It was Dylan, and you were right. That savior that Jesus had captured and taken to the hilltop. It hails back to him because he basically says the same thing. We've all come into this to try to find safety and try to contribute in some fashion, but obviously being with the saviors, in general, you're just going to end up with blood on your hands. And the way this whole system is set up, there's just no other way around it. And Eugene we slowly start to see that through illusion and through interactions, and the overview of the whole show is kind of showing us that even with all the crazy things that have happened throughout the seasons, the last few seasons with the saviors, there's just subtle reminders throughout this episode of the terror that has been kind of inflicted in order to maintain order and reorganize power, as Negan says, almost Eugene. No kidding. But it's very interesting to see that play out in a more subtle way and a less menacing way, which is kind of welcome, because in some form or fashion, I think with all the face burning and the bat hitting and all that stuff, we kind of lost sight of the subtle ways in which the saviors have kind of operated.
Sure.
The more subtle, terrification.
Terrification. They definitely give off an air and set a tone that's present. And I think, the Jeffrey D. Morgan, who plays Negan, just does such a good job with the character in terms of always making you feel that at any moment, he could switch it on you.
Oh yeah.
In his conversations with Eugene, and you just never know necessarily what's going to happen. So I think it was very interesting.
Yeah, and you almost have to give credit to the writers in this episode, because there are things that I picked up, the writers and also the people that do props and makeup and that construct each storyboard, because there are little things within the episode that I could even just mention, get out of the way now, is just when Dwight kind of focuses on Eugene after his first conversation with Negan, how he leans in and says the burning flesh, and it kind of shows his face up close, Dwight's face. So there's that reminder. And then right after that, you see a scene of two saviors barricading the door, and the male savior actually has a burned face as well.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that the first take, but I did notice it the second take, the second time I watched it to write notes. And it's just so subtle. It's a small, obviously a much smaller burn, because it seems like Dwight needed a little bit more reminding.
Right. Yeah.
But you see that. And then Tanya, you get that, where, Tanya is just basically a living reminder of living in a cage, being a caged bird who sings, so to speak, for her supper.
Essentially,
and the very nihilistic part of it. So you got these, writing mechanic hints, you get these prop hints. She's still in the dress too, the same dress. You'd think she'd change, but I guess that's the attire.
Yeah, still in the black cocktail dresses.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's other things we'll touch upon on the way, but I think we really start out with Eugene just pacing around his room with the list, which is so funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, his various columns.
Yeah, what I know, what I don't know, things I'm on a railroad.
Holy.
Like a lot of these things you just can't possibly write down. So
it was very interesting that's how he categorized everything.
Yeah, and what's even more funny about that is that the show kind of, it keeps us on our toes, let's just say, because from the beginning, when we first started talking about Eugene, I think in the first episode, my overall impression of him was that he was an idiot. He was actually kind of an idiot.
I think that everybody got that impression. He was like a doofus, kind of like.
Yeah, like I had no doubt that in some narrow way he was highly intelligent, but for the most part, just socially stupid and awkward.
Right.
You just no sense of social skills, no emotional intelligence, just does not know how to navigate the world, which kind of says something about the show, like how people like these probably wouldn't have lasted as long, but somehow he made it through. And that's kind of like why this episode is so important, actually, because you start to see the ways in which that catches up with him. Yes. How sheltered he was and how it fed into this idea of really needing to get safety. To really almost desperately cling to the safest harbor, no matter what it is, and maybe make the most of it. I mean, obviously, I think he wants to try to do good, but, I think his safety is paramount to that. So,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then that's where we see the first confrontation between him and Dwight, which is kind of good. I'm glad they kind of did that right off the bat, where he mentions Ock and to tell him to cease and desist.
Ock.
Yeah. Basically, Dwight is telling him to let it play out. You've seen what happens here. You don't got blood blood on your hands yet, but that's coming.
Yeah.
Once you do those things, you become those things, and there's no going back. No forgetting it.
I thought that was a really excellent monologue for Dwight. I mean, I thought that was really well done, and I think that what he said is going to come back. That was very ominous. It was very much a foreshadowing to me of what could happen, especially because they still make the point of showing that Eugene still has that red paint on his thumb. It's still there.
Yeah, literally. The sign of blood on his hands.
Exactly.
But, yeah, and you know, it's funny, as we're talking, I remember that we have met Dwight and Sherry before we knew them at the sanctuary, really. You know, we saw them do some sneaky things to Daryl.
Yeah.
Some quite sneaky things. But it's weird that we've seen him and we've known about the Saviors for so long. Like in such a kind of drawn out way, in a slowly drawn out fashion. And to kind of see him get to this point where he was subjugated, much in the way that Daryl was subjugated, but it kind of stuck.
Yeah.
But we see him here finally kind of standing up and really realizing what the cost has been. And I think in a weird way, Dwight is sympathetic to Eugene. He's kind of like saying,
yeah, I think so.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be bothering with him. But I think he's going through something right now where he's just sick and tired of doing this anymore. You know, it's just got to stop somewhere. Maybe I can't erase the blood that's already in my hands, but I can at least stop from spilling some anymore.
Right. You know? I think so. I mean, he's come a long way, and he's trying to, you know, turn things around, and yeah, he's experienced what he's told Eugene. He's had to kill people that he hasn't wanted to, you know, because that's part of being a savior, and he has to live with that every day.
And the worst reminder of that is the toll it took on his relationship with Sherry.
Yeah.
You know, and now she's gone, and so
for now,
I think there's part of for now.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. But yeah, it's necessary for this plot device. To know that she's gone. So, yeah, the thing about Eugene is that it's not only even Abraham, but it was Rosita as well. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that part of their weird trio relationship was that, like, Abraham was the dad and Rosita was the mom, and you know, and then he saw them having ugly sex, and you know,
nobody ever forgets that.
Dolphin smooth.
Dolphin smooth. Like, nobody forgets those things. Those two pieces, nobody ever forgets.
Nope. And you know, but unlike a kid, he kind of just sat there and watched.
Yes. And so I think Tara stopped him. I think it was Tara that came and was like, dude. Yeah.
But yeah, it further reinforces like his sense of needing safety, and then with every little terrifying thing that happens, like he does keep a cool head, but at the same time, his first instinct is to cling to the cult of Negan, you know, to really embrace it, you know, let it envelop him, you know, like a safety bubble, you know, and as long as he's within that safety bubble, he seems to function, you know, like fully. Again, head on his shoulders because he's safe. We've seen him in the past. When he's terrified, he's kind of like he's hysterical. He just can't keep it together.
Yeah, he falls apart. We see him like fall apart
several times.
Multiple times at a time.
But what's funny about that is it makes me pivot to Gregory a little bit, and how pathetic he was when what he was doing, what he usually does, isn't working. You know, he can't politic his way out of being thrown in the pig pen, the savior pig pen at the hilltop, and he's just a mess. And it's the only thing he knows. And Eugene, safety essentially has been the only thing he knows too. Like, he knows some killing, but he doesn't really know killing. Let's be really honest. You know, or at least putting down walkers is what I meant. But but he doesn't know killing either. You know, so it's this thing where you draw these parallels between Gregory, who's kind of a detestable character in the way he goes about it, and Eugene is kind of like, in a way, he's kind of innocent. You know, as much as he puts on a front throughout, you know, in some spots in the episode, he's kind of the same thing, except without being a horrible person. His primary thing is like not wanting to kill or hurt anybody.
Right. Yep.
If I support one cause, the other, you know, these people die. If I do nothing, the people at the Savior die. The workers, the Saviors themselves. You know, so what am I supposed to do? These people have kept me safe. You know, I have a role. I'm important. You know, so
he has a purpose here. He has a purpose at the sanctuary, which he didn't really have with Rick. I mean, he didn't really have any sort of purpose. He was just there. So
that's a big thing too, because another one of the things we started talking about, I think even in the first episode, is that every scene that we see him in, at least in the last season, he's just useless. He doesn't really contribute. He doesn't, all the things that he was able to do at the sanctuary, like the cool little science experiments he did for the ladies, for Negan's wives, all the cool things, like even the bullet making, right up to it starts with the bullet making, but right away Negan capitalizes on that.
Oh yeah.
And the first kind of act that we see that has some sort of intelligence. And if we hadn't seen that, we wouldn't even known, like, all the stories that he was telling to Abraham and Rosita, we could have just called him on his bullshit. But
right, exactly.
But here he's like magically some important person. Here he has an actual function.
The
survival stuff is not for him.
No, he actually has a function. He actually has a purpose. He doesn't just have to fight for his survival. As long as he, basically does his job, he's protected. He's looked after, and that's basically
rewarded.
It. And rewarded.
With his status, like, he's no Rick, he's no Daryl.
No, but he's up there. He's like in the upper, basically he's upper management.
Oh yeah, the second most important the person there.
That's a big deal. Yeah. He was about to kiss his hand, though. I was like, wow, man.
I actually, when I saw that, I was like, does he want to kiss his hand? And then he started doing it. I'm like, oh, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, all right, I guess I would do that too, because that's the kind of person I am in the Walker apocalypse.
Well, that was the thing. It was like, I think Josh McDermott, the actor, said that it's like the way he extends his hand. He's like, that's automatically what he would think. I mean, then he kind of explains afterwards when he's like, oh, like, what are you doing? And he's like, get up. I get the impression that he was trying to get him up to shake his hand. Because the way he had his hand, it was sort of like, hey, look at my engagement ring. Like, it was just, I don't know. It was just, it wasn't in a handshake form. It was like,
I'll make you the happiest wife.
Yes. It was in a very different form. So, but then the way they made it seem is like, okay, that he wanted him to get up and then shake his hand and, show him mutual respect, which, again, not necessarily something that he got with Rick's group. I mean, they tolerated him, but I don't think that there was a mutual respect. No.
Yeah, because he's pulled some shit too.
That's for sure. No, I mean, I don't blame Rick and Team Grimes for that. I mean,
no, who can really?
Yeah.
But here he's revered almost.
I was going to say revered.
Very strange dude, but yeah, the pickle thing. And come on.
He's eccentric.
Yeah. If you think about it, he's kind of like a safe harbor for so many of these people. Like, think of all the people in the upper echelons, like Regina, Simon, all these frightening, terrifying, even Gavin to a certain extent. Let's be honest.
And then there's Eugene.
And then there's Eugene. He's like, oh, I can talk to this guy. He can do me favors and we can exchange things. He doesn't take like the upper echelon. Like the people protecting the workers.
No, because I feel like a lot of the guys in Negan's cabinet, for lack of a better word, basically get off on this sort of dominating the population and all of that. They enjoy that, so they enjoy being like formidable and intimidating and all that sort of thing. So, whereas Eugene, he's not that person. That's not who he is whatsoever.
Yeah. It's not only that they enjoy it. I mean, they enjoy it because it's part of their ethos. I mean, the saying is, we take what's ours, we don't give nothing back. And that's just them. That's what these saviors are. In the workers, they're almost mutually exclusive. They're part of the same umbrella, but they're just mutually exclusive from.
Oh, totally.
They're not really even saviors. So they're just people that are under them. They're part of the savior economy. They're capital city, if you will.
Yeah, the saviors are like the warriors in the castle, and you have like all these like peasants that essentially like live under their thumb.
Yep, the knights and the knights. You could even say lords, knights, and then you have the serfs. The serfs and peasants.
Yeah, essentially that's what it is.
Yep, and then you have the hilltop, the Alexandria, and the kingdom, and these are kind of just like it's like all this fiefdom stuff. They're giving fiefs to the King Negan. Yeah,
not to be confused with King Ezekiel
or King Arthur even. Because he's got his square table full of little dents in it.
Yes.
But, So the next scene we do see Dr. Carson. We see him again because I think I remember seeing him at the hilltop when they took him finally.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of.
you kind of just start seeing that with all the kindness that Carson is trying to extend to Eugene, basically trying to say, hey, I know you're a nice guy, and this guy was your friend, traveling compartment.
Yes, traveling companion.
And basically that's it. Like Eugene kind of just tries to distance himself. You start to see his commitment to the Saviors. You know, he starts to see his outward, you know, posturing. You know, and it's not malicious. It's not. First of all, it's just Eugene. First of all, he's just he seems to be just like this. You know, like on a regular basis. But I mean, he had to pretend for so long to be this important Dr. Eugene Porter.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So he knows how to pretend to be something that he's not.
Oh yeah.
To just stay alive. You know, he had to pretend to be that way to get this protection from Abraham and Rosita for so long. So Carson just it's kind of cool what he just said. What he makes him do. He's not just a doctor. He's a person that cares, and he kind of goes, hey, well, look at it this way. Do you want him to die? He's like, no. So he kind of just gets to the core of you really quick.
Yeah, he was off to find some Eastern medicine for the doctor, for Father Gabriel. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Things are getting dire at the sanctuary.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, it just sounded, the way he made it seem, it's like Gabriel's organs are not doing well and they're infected and they're going to continue to shut down, but there's no medicine, so he's going to go find some weed for Father Gabriel. Like, that's basically what I got from it. I mean, like, really, that's what I got from
Eastern medicine is weed.
Well, it just seemed, I think he also said herbs.
Okay. I see.
I could have sworn that he also said herbs, and I was like, so we're there now?
And a green light bulb lit above your head.
Like,
that's what you thought. You know, it's funny how I didn't even think that, but now it's like the only thing I'm thinking of right now. It's like,
and if that is the case, I would be like, well, here we have a situation where we have the sanctuary that apparently has Eastern medicine, herbs, and weed, and essential air. So,
what a place to be, the sanctuary.
It's called the sanctuary. It's called the sanctuary.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who knew? I didn't know. You knew.
Very intuitive. I try. I do my best.
That's why we do a podcast.
Exactly.
That's the way I'm summing this up.
Yeah.
But yeah. One important thing that he mentions when Carson's out of the room to Father Gabriel, and you know, Gabriel's trying to basically chat him up, telling him that, like, you know, you got to have faith. You know, God has a plan, and Eugene just kind of fires back right away. Like, even if I wanted to, I couldn't even take the good doctor out, because if I'm supposed to put on all those guts to smuggle him out, I'm just gonna get just as sick as you, and I don't want to die.
Yeah.
You know, where so many people have gone horizontal, I'm still vertical. So it's that whole thing, and that's a very good point, because the truth is that he could probably leave whenever he wanted to by just employing the same routine. But we're starting to see that it may have worked in the beginning, the whole guts thing, but I think now this is one of those things that they can't change. It's like one more danger that the walkers pose.
Yeah,
this concept now.
And I also wonder if it has anything to do with the episode where all the Kingdom Knights were killed. At the end, we see that there was some sort of radioactive waste or something where we had those, like, walkers go through that lake or whatever. I wonder if that has anything to do with
that. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay. So organ shutdown, that's kind of like typical of radiation. Like, everything starts to kind of not liquefy, but really just it can't function anymore. You get cell death and radioactivity.
Because otherwise, I feel like kind of showing this sort of radioactive sort of waste thing, like, I just feel like, for lack of a better term, would be a waste to kind of, you know, show this, and then sort of like, oh, you know, it's, they happen to be going through a lake of radioactive waste. It's like, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe, you know, it is the case that some of these walkers have gone through this, and, you know, beyond the fact that it's walker guts that are already bad, but maybe it's to another level. You know, because of that. So
I will say, for the people that'll get snarky and say, oh, you know, they were stuck in that little toxic pit, you know, toxic stream, they couldn't get out. And it's true, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, but, like, I mean, you never know where that stream's going to go down. They could have just kept following the stream. Yeah. You know, it's shiny. They might do it.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it could have. I just kind of feel that it's not a point to just kind of throw away. I feel like potentially that could be part of the reason why this time around Father Gabriel is having the reaction that he's having.
Yeah, it's such an extreme and sudden reaction too. It kind of took hold of him fairly quickly.
Very, very quick. It happened very quickly.
Yeah, by the time Negan was out of the shower, Gabriel was in shivers.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
Yeah, so that hadn't occurred to me. Points to Carol. Yeah, I gotta give it to you. Ding ding.
I tried. Ding.
Well,
I should have a little bell.
You should just carry around a little bell, just in general.
Bell, like,
that means I did something right.
Yeah, I'm gonna order one off Amazon.
Yeah.
I will. I'm gonna use it.
Bitch.
Yep.
I got Prime.
I'm gonna have that thing. It's gonna be ready.
Well, 'tis the season, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of leave off that scene with Gabriel just telling him as he kind of collapses a little bit that you know what the right thing to do is when it comes. You know, you'll see it. When you see it, you'll just do it.
Yep.
You know, just keep your eyes open, basically.
That's what a good man says.
You know, and the very next scene, I think we see Eugene. We do see him in his room, kind of thinking about the situation, and Tanya basically asks him for his boombox.
Yes.
I was very annoyed with this at first, and then this scene at first.
Do tell. Explain why.
But I will say one thing. When I watched it the second time, I realized the significance of it because of all these little mechanics, all these little tells about how the saviors really are. And Tanya is really just kind of like a living, like I mentioned before, she's kind of like a living reminder of how it is here.
Oh,
you know, is this what you want to save? And she kind of just says it.
Oh yeah, she's very, very like straight with him about basically like you had the opportunity to do something about this situation and you didn't. You looked for yourself.
Right. But you know, of course, we're watching the scene at first. At first thought, we're like, who does this bitch think she is? What are you doing, girl? There are like dead things outside your door and you care about a boombox.
Hey,
this is what annoyed me the most.
I know, priorities, right?
Right, exactly. You know, and this is what you care about?
In my mind, I kind of just figured like, well, because the other savior, neck tattoo girl, I don't know her name.
Oh yeah, I wish I knew her name because I know we've seen her before, but
we have. I do not remember her name. You know, she tells Eugene that she thinks that they have like another day, 2 tops, based on how it's looking. So maybe Tanya's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna listen to some music and just that's it. That's as good as it's gonna get.
This is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Just to explain the scene a little bit more, she asks him about the boombox, and she's there with the wine. The deal that they struck is basically 1 bottle of wine before and 1 bottle after. She has it in her hand. She kind of thinks that he's already done with it. He's not. He wants it from her anyway, and he admits that he kind of needs the giggle juice to kind of sleep. Mm-hmm. And and it's this whole scene where she's really reminding him that like you said, he could have done something about the saviors before this happened.
Yes.
And there's a lot to talk about here because as you and I have broken down these episodes, we've already been on board with Rick's plan. You know, I still think that even back then, like had they known what they known about the saviors all along, Rick's plan would have been the only way to go. You got to convince these people that the saviors can't really offer the kind of safety that they say they can. You know,
right.
And then convince them that there's another way. So my strong inclination about Tanya is that she's been wrong 2 times now. You know, she's wrong now, and she was wrong back then to try to get Eugene to knock off Negan. So that's my strongest inclination. But there's something about this episode, the way Negan is kind of saying you're the second most important person here, and how she's basically kind of saying you may have been smart enough to actually be able to hold this place together, convince these people that there's another way on your own. And I'm not 100% convinced of that, but there's a part of me that thinks that what if Eugene kind of came into his own? What if he, like, just like he was Dr. Eugene Porter with Abraham and Rosita, could he have maybe convinced Simon, Gavin, Regina, Dwight that things could be better? You know, part of me thinks, okay, these people would eat him alive. They would eat each other in a power vacuum to try to be top dog, and in the end, at the end of the day, as these things go, the whole system would collapse. You know, in the struggle for power, all these workers it would just downstream travel to the workers. The workers would probably rise up and it would be done. And you start to see that really Negan, I mean, as I follow this logically, Negan is practically the only person that's kind of keeping this all together. One way or the other. You know, the way he does it seems to work, even though it's not a way to live.
No, it's not a way to live, but I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that he has managed to keep his people in line. In Rick's part, you know, he's got people on his side basically going on all these random renegade missions and not listening to his orders. On the other hand, Negan seems to kind of keep his people in line. And there's something to be said about the fact that he's able to keep people in line even with the dire situation that they're in, because at the end of the day, they're closed in. I mean, obviously this is before, you know, the Daryl rams the truck into the wall and all of that. But before that, I mean, they were basically trapped inside with walkers heavily surrounding them, running low on resources, not necessarily sure what they were going to do. And you didn't have anybody turn on Negan at all. They kind of are still looking to him for like guidance. What do we do?
Right, we only have faith in you. That's what.
Yes, they don't have faith in like the lieutenants or anything like that. They only have faith in him.
Yeah, well, I think for the most part, I think it should be understood at this point that Negan has cultivated these knights to a point where if he's not there, I think he knows that he's made them ruthless enough to actually be detrimental if he was not there.
Right.
Like oh, I did such a good job, but like at the end of the day, there's a double-edged sword here. I've raised a bunch of wolves among sheep. And if the shepherd isn't there, the wolves are going to attack the sheep, or each other, to do alpha dog. So it's just very trepidatious, which kind of further reinforces the point that Eugene is not the guy. He would never have been the guy. And so what Tanya says is although it's kind of, you could have done something, and maybe that's the takeaway here, you could have done something, but you didn't. It kind of reinforces the idea that Father Gabriel's basically saying is that you should do something, do the right thing,
Right.
He doesn't tell him to do. That's another thing to note, is that as much as Father Gabriel says he should take Carson out to the hilltop, or back to the hilltop, and he says this at first, at the end of the day he just says, just do the right thing, do what's right. And I think that's probably the best advice he's been given, like between Dwight, between Tanya, that's probably the best advice he could probably take. And credit to Gabriel for that, actually, because it gets in his head. It's the only thing that seems to get in his head. Tanya doesn't really get into his head, but and he seems to fight Dwight on not doing anything, but with Gabriel he kind of pauses. There's this look of I don't know, which is you don't really see with Eugene. He kind of just jumps to the answer. He seems to make everybody think like he knows everything, but when we know that he really doesn't.
Yeah.
So I noticed that when we saw him fixing the boombox, that scene, what I didn't notice, what you might not have noticed, is he already had the kite plans on his desk. I actually paused there. Yeah, it was really cool. Like he already seemed to have had plans.
An
for
idea.
The kite.
He already had an idea. Yeah.
And he just kind of put them all together.
And then we see him go into, I don't know what area it was of the sanctuary, but he found the coffin that Sasha was in and got the iPod that was in there.
An iPod 1, I think.
It was a pretty old iPod.
Yeah, I think it was the first one.
How did that thing still have a charge? I'm nitpicking here, but
it's the magic of television.
The magic of television. Just suspend your belief. Just suspend it right now.
A lot of editing in post.
Yes.
A lot of CG.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe the whole thing wasn't real. Maybe it wasn't really an iPod 1. It was just a box that they CG'd an iPod 1 over.
Well, we have to talk about our thoughts on the helicopter that magically has not shown up again.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. Let's take a break to talk about that, because where did that come from if it wasn't from the junkyard, right?
I don't know. I do not know. I feel like it has to come up in the mid-season finale. You can't just show a black helicopter overhead and then it's like, okay, well, we're not going to talk about it anymore until later. It's like, you can't do that.
I like that you reminded me of that. That's because I kind of forgot about it in all the hubbub, and I assumed that it was the junkyard gang, but I didn't really. I like calling them that, by the way. But
junkyard gang. Good description.
It's a softer tone, It's like trash hipsters. I called them the dumpsters for a while in my head because I didn't say it out loud. And I was just like, the junkyard gang. They're a groovy bunch of people who really annoy me. But yeah, you're right. It's probably a very important thing to bring up because they're out there somewhere, and Heath is out there somewhere.
Yeah. They're all out there somewhere in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So, they did mention a flyer, so I'm not really sure.
I wonder if that's what that means. I don't know if that's what it is. It's like if they have access to a helicopter, but that's so strange. It's possible. It could be something that's controlled by the Saviors, and they'll use it if necessary to basically rain down on unsuspecting enemies, but. I don't know. I was just like, that helicopter has to come up.
Yeah. Well, it could be a group that we're entirely unaware of, too.
That would be crazy.
And the Saviors seem to have a hold on them as well. And maybe it's one of those situations where they don't want to have to use it unless they really have to, because then they feel like they owe them. Maybe this group is on shaky ground with them. It's the only thing I could really think of.
Yeah.
It only just reminded me now. that thing exists. And it's
yeah.
obviously something we haven't seen on the grounds. We haven't seen at any of the stations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's out there. And wherever it came from, it did not come from any of those satellite stations, did not come from the sanctuary.
No,
so it's worth kind of thinking of, at least for a little bit, like knowing that it's there and it's out there and it could actually do some damage.
Yeah,
or it could be an entirely third party and we don't know.
God, it's so nuts.
But yeah, it's this whole thing.
Can I tell you side tangent what I want that helicopter to be? Like it would be more suitable for the end of the show, because I'm always with my eye on the prize of like, well, how is this thing going to end? In my mind,
the end of the show, period, the series finale.
Yes, exactly. In my mind, I would love for that black helicopter to be filled with soldiers from another country altogether, like not from the continent of like the Americas at all. Like I would love it to be a situation in my mind. Mm-hmm. I would love to find out that this whole zombie apocalyptic epidemic has only affected like the US, Canada, like neighboring countries, but other countries have not, and we've all been quarantined. Wow. That's what I want.
Like a chemical assault?
Maybe. I don't know. Like I just want to see that like it's just us. Other parts of the world are living just fine.
So I'll tell you one thing. I know you haven't watched Fear the Walking Dead, but I do know that at least this part of the hemisphere, the United States, but you've got Mexico, you've got South America, you've got, I don't know about Canada, but they do mention, because they are on the ocean for a little while, so they're trying to get radio waves on what's happening around the world, or not around the world, but around their vicinity. So you do know that at least the West, the western part of the hemisphere has been affected. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I do know that it has affected more than just the United States or North America, let's just say.
Right. Because in my mind, I mean, because the reason that I thought is that... I do love your theory, though.
I don't think that's where it would end, though. In my mind, I'd be like, no, I want to know more now.
No, it would be an intriguing possibility of like, where do you go now? Like, that's the thing. I find it intriguing because the whole zombie lore of this show is the idea of like, everybody's infected. Every single person is infected with what turns you. Doesn't matter whether you're bit or not. As soon as you pass away, it's like you will turn. It gives off the impression that it's some sort of like, I mean, they've never gone into it, obviously, but almost like some sort of government vaccine or something, because for everybody to have it already in them, it's almost as if something that's administered for everyone to have that in them. Which isn't necessarily the case in all countries. That's things specific to certain regions and certain areas and certain countries. It wouldn't be, everywhere. So for that reason, it's like, I feel like it would be so jarring for like to see a helicopter with just normal people, just normal soldiers, just because other parts of the country have been living just fine because the U.S. has just gone off their rocker. Not trying to get political or anything. But
again, are you not?
No, not at all. Not at all.
But yeah, the idea of a chemically engineered biological weapon is very intriguing to me now.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if you ever watched the show Revolution.
Which channel is that on?
It was showed a few years ago. I think it only lasted a season plus. Mm-hmm. But it was basically surrounded around the idea of what would happen to the United States without power. Period.
Okay.
And it all comes down to a computer that has found a way to put something in the air that causes electrical signals to not be able to transfer. So it was designed to be a weapon that somehow misfired in the lab, and you find out later on that it was somebody had a hand in that and the whole thing. But it does kind of the same thing. Like the United States does kind of devolve, and you realize that it's this weird. They kind of form this almost like Negan kind of empire led by this one person who kind of rose up and took over and enforced his will on everybody. But it's similar in that effect, and it's not only the United States that is affected here, but it was the entire world too, which is very interesting. People just trying to find safe harbor around the world, it's away from this one guy. Madison, I think, is a lot of colonial names like Madison and Jefferson and Jackson, like all these character names. So just kind of interesting how that plans out. I forgot why I even mentioned this, but it's just
because we were I blame myself. It's all my fault. I was like, side tangent, black helicopter. Sorry.
Side tangent. There are helicopters because that runs off of combustion. So,
Okay.
oh, no, I'm sorry. They find out little pockets of how to get electricity to work. And so that really kind of turns it on its head. Like, who has the power? The person that can wield electricity. It's really, really strange. I mean, I'd recommend watching it anyway. But to get back to the story, it's just the idea that, okay, you have this element that's out there that we don't know about. And it could come up at any time. And I think we're going to know about it in this finale, this mid-season finale. There's just no way you can keep that thing up in the air for that long. But yeah, I want to talk about the coffin though, Sasha in the coffin, because I wanted
that was a really jarring moment. Like when that moment kind of like I jumped a little bit. I was like, whoa. I was like, forgot about that.
Yeah, and I was kind of looking at Eugene's face as he experiences that, that moment.
Yeah,
as he's remembering. And I don't think it's a matter of him being scared. I think he's kind of thinking of what, by clinging to these people, am I betraying people that have made genuine sacrifices? I mean, I gave this woman a pill that would kill herself. I could never do that.
Right. That the level of bravery that he's witnessed from Rick's group. I mean, Sasha, Glenn, Abraham. I mean, these are people that have demonstrated enormous bravery in very, very dire situations.
Right. Which she's witnessed.
Yeah, which Eugene could never do. I mean, he knows that he flat out admits it. He doesn't try to be somebody he's not. He flat out admits that he's not brave. He's not that person. He's small. He's a small person.
Right.
And he's just interested in self-preservation above all else.
Yeah, and the more you look at this episode, you start to see several things playing out and trying to exert pressure on him from all sides. You have these reminders of what the saviors are. He is affected by this, and we'll get to what I think affects him in a way that we don't expect later on. But more than anything, you get the burnt faces, you get the Negan's wives, you get the way these workers are living, but you also get reminders of bravery. You get these reminders of Sasha. You get these reminders of Gabriel trying to tell him, and it does affect him. It affects him almost in kind of like a negative way. Also, like okay, so fine, I'm small. Okay, I get it. I'm small. But then you see that as a result of this, he kind of starts to change his actions, and one of those things is when he's on the roof and trying to manipulate the kite flyer with the iPod 1, and you see him defy Dwight, something that I don't think we would have ever seen him do.
No,
We've seen him try to do brave things, like especially in the bullet. I don't know if it was in the Bullet Factory, but it's somewhere. But never to the level of facing
this guy had death. A gun to your head.
Yeah, I mean he's not an unmenacing character.
No,
Dwight. He killed Tara's girlfriend.
Denise.
Yeah, Denise. Thank you. She's a terrific actress too. If you've ever seen Nurse Jackie,
she's
on there too.
Okay.
She's terrific. So
that was a very precarious situation. I mean, honestly, I was watching it from my perspective, and I kind of wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was like, I really wasn't sure, because Eugene's an important character, but at the same time, I would not have necessarily been shocked if Dwight would have shot him. I was kind of like, oh God, this could happen. Obviously, he doesn't. He shoots his drone that he made. But yeah, that was like a lot of bravery on the part of Eugene to basically kind of say, yeah, you have a gun to my head, but I'm going to still do this anyway.
Yeah. I think, and maybe that was, and that's the thing, maybe that was his one act of doing the right thing. Like, as much as we try to criticize maybe Eugene for clinging to the saviors, there's something to be said about the way he buys in is not the same way that the upper echelon buys in. You see Simon, and he's not power hungry, but he certainly takes advantage of his position of power. He kind of relishes in it, right? Oh, you have Gavin, who enjoys the seat of power, even though it comes with kind of like, grunt, do I have to do this? Which is kind of shitty, because if you think about
grisly. He's one of those grisly upper management guys that just hates his job, and but it pays really well.
Isn't that like the epitome of privilege too? Like that, and not to get into this arena, but like, just like, dude, you enjoy like a crazy amount of privileges because of what you're doing. Just, you know what? Take the mantle. Just stop acting like you're annoyed by everything. I'm just so annoyed by this guy.
Yeah.
No, clearly, I hear you. Like, while other people out in the world, let's say, are suffering, and even the workers that can't even touch you. Yeah. It's like, dude, just be thankful, Yeah.
It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, and Regina, who's obviously bloodthirsty.
Very much so.
And then you have Dwight, who's kind of living as kind of a lapdog. And so, and just to see Eugene come about embracing this from the standpoint of, I get you. Like, or at least Negan, I get you. I get why you're doing what you're doing, why you've built the structure, because I see what you're doing. I see that you're trying to give people purpose, even crappy people,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so.
And you do care about people in your own way, so I'm going to try to live this ethos. I'm going to try to embrace it from where I'm standing and the way I want to contribute, and Negan enables him to do that. He really kind of sees where he's coming from, where Eugene's coming from is what I'm saying.
He basically gives him like some more rope, and it's like, sure, here you go. Like he's basically very much satiating his ego. He's feeding into his ego. He's doing all the things that are basically further convincing Eugene that he made the right decision.
Let's even talk about Negan just for a second, because it's suddenly occurring to me that his affinity for Eugene, Negan's affinity for Eugene, may actually be genuine. I mean, if you really think about it, we had this episode where we explored Negan's philosophy when it comes to people, and he must be so sick and tired of people just buying in to be safe.
Sure.
And Eugene is doing essentially the same thing, but
he's contributing something different, and I think that's what makes it so interesting to him, like somebody like Eugene, because he has a well of knowledge that he knows that, if properly harnessed, can be incredibly effective for, the saviors. Whereas other people are just sort of like, I'll give you whatever you need for protection. Here's my firstborn daughter, like, I don't, I mean, it's kind of like that, whereas like Eugene has something literally, something tangible to contribute.
But even more than that, what I'm thinking is that I think Negan sees that Eugene understands him, whereas his lieutenants probably don't. His lieutenants probably they fall in line, and they emulate as well. They emulate his nutsack holding, bravado, bat to the desk, iron to the face kind of mentality. They don't get it, and I think Negan appreciates the fact that Eugene gets him also. Like Eugene, without even having a confessional with Father Gabriel, I think Eugene gets him, and he says as much. Eugene says as much. We're saviors. We save. And it's just saying that like it's almost like a proud father of a son. I don't have to be this way with him, which must be so refreshing for him. Like I don't have to lead this guy. I don't have to manipulate this guy as much. I just have to tap into something he already gets with this whole thing. So maybe it starts to get me thinking that it's not all an act. Like maybe he is being an encouraging father figure to Eugene. Even the thing where he says stand up and then shake my hand, like he's teaching his son how to properly shake someone's hand, because this is how you do it, son. This is how you do it with people that you respect, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. That scene alone, that little thing, just really got me, like in a way, like oh, it started getting me thinking, like is this not genuine? Because at first I was like, oh, he's full of shit. Like the more I think about it, he's like, oh wait, it must be nice to have somebody who gets it. That
it
gets
has
what
to
I'm
be
trying
comforting
to do, without having to explain it. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, I do like the idea that that Eugene has to mention that Negan isn't the dying type.
Yes, I think that's a little that's definitely a little breadcrumb for people to follow. Negan ain't the dying type. I obviously am a comic reader, so I come from a different perspective, clearly. But yeah, Negan is a very pivotal, important character, so he isn't a character that you're just going to kill off. It's not that cut and dry.
And we're starting to see that too.
Because
I can't imagine how the Sanctuary would not lose all of these people without Negan.
No,
and it
absolutely.
seems to me that it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But the only positive thing I could see come out of this is that they reach an accord of some kind, because there's just no way these people would be able to be cool in this world without him, or at least ease into a world with him in it, like wean them off of Negan and the way he is. So that's the only thing I could think of, really, because it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's something that Tanya does not get. It's not that simple.
Yeah,
it's something that Daryl and Daryl they don't get. They just don't get it.
No, they're impulsive.
Was it Eugene that bit Dwight's junk?
Yes, it was.
Okay, was this at the Bullet Factory or something?
Yes, it was outside of the armory.
The only two times that Eugene has shown a shred of bravery is towards Dwight.
Well, towards the saviors, because there was that time that he bit
Dwight's
Dwight.
junk.
But there was also his one shining moment when, they were trying to get Maggie to the doctor, and he drove the RV to distract the saviors so that they can kind of keep going on their mission to bring Maggie over to the doctor.
That is a good point.
Obviously, we all know how that ended, but that was like his moment. And I think he mentioned it to Sasha that, he rode off in the sunset with this bravery and, thinking he was going to be a hero. And he was fully prepared at that point to die because he felt like he was going out with like a purpose. But, obviously he got captured. It didn't happen. And, I think seeing the way that two people like Abraham and Glenn were murdered in front of him, I think added that extra layer of, no, man, I'm not going to go down that road. Self-preservation at all costs.
Yeah, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And in that way, Negan wins,
Right, yeah.
Oh, boy. But he does get it. Like, he's seen it, but he still gets it. He does the math, he doesn't think of these things emotionally. Like,
no.
I mean, not to the extent that we do, but
very
he does
logically.
do calculus. Yeah.
Yes, it all has to make sense.
Yeah, and he is quite mad. He is quite mad not only after Dwight shoots the kite. I mean, first of all, the bullets start flying, and the sniper bullets start flying when the garbage truck starts to ram the sanctuary. So he has no choice but to kind of flee. He can't really even process the fact that Dwight foiled his plans to save the saviors. So,
right.
But when he starts seeing the bodies fall as the walkers start to take over the factory floor, he is pissed.
Yeah, he's livid. He's absolutely livid. He's shaking.
His one true act of bravery. Like, there's little bouts of defiance, but his one true clean act of bravery to try to save people. And something that he's never done before.
Yeah, and I think that he takes his post very seriously. And so basically in his mind, this is an opportunity for him to make a contribution and save these people rather than just being killed by these, zombies. I'd love to hear what Eugene thinks about Daryl and Tara drove the truck into the sanctuary. I wonder,
like his reaction, you mean?
I wonder if what does he think about it? I mean, does he think that Rick and the group are soulless, heartless killers that just kind of want to, open it up to the floodgates? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we'll find out too. I'm sure we'll find out more.
Oh, and I don't blame you for leaving it there, but you are drawing a good point. Like, he does mention things like Father Gabriel was partially responsible for Rick's crew rolling up in the sanctuary and getting the walkers all there. So he does exhibit a sense of, I guess it's not hatred per se, but he's like, I know who the guilty party is.
Right.
And anybody involved in that is responsible too. I don't know if he really genuinely feels that way, but I know that he has to be that way.
He has to be that way, yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a phony thing, because I think he kind of believes that, like, I'm invested in my safety here, so I have to kind of act accordingly. But I think he does feel for Sasha. I think he does feel for Rick and his crew, but I do think that there may be a part of it that he needs to reconcile with, Yeah, and having his only real act of bravery, his true pure form of bravery, be thwarted, it's just a kick in the teeth after Father Gabriel's speech. Just to have that happen to him, any one of us would feel that way. You're trying to do a good thing and then somebody spits in your face, not maybe literally, but it's just kind of like, it's the worst feeling to have. I try to do good, but it doesn't pan out, and it's not what people tell you that will happen when you do a good thing. So it's not what they say.
Karma doesn't happen in the apocalypse.
The apocalypse changes everything.
Changed everything.
I'll tell you what, in life I've been through scenarios like that where you try to do the right thing and then you get kicked in the teeth. It's just terrible. Not literally, because that sounds horrible.
That's horrible.
But yeah, I think we've all hit that in some gradient. At one time in our lives. The next real scene we see Eugene in after he visits Father Gabriel and then loads his sack of venom. We see Negan and Eugene, and they're talking about making bullets. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that they've already have a conversation about either getting him to the factory or getting the factory to him. Either way, he's on board, And then Negan says, how does it feel to save people? And he says, it feels great.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he says it feels great.
Yeah. And I believe it too. Like, I think part of me believes that the only thing that makes me think that some of this is an act is the very next part of that scene is when Dwight pops in as he's about to rat him out. And the one thing that I noticed was that, so Eugene was on Dwight's left side, and the left side of his face is burnt. And there's a lot of little tells throughout the episode, like the burnt faces of the people, the guy in the front, Dwight's face mentioning the burnt flesh, and then Tanya, and then all the horrible things that, I mean, even Dr. Carson himself, he was part of Hilltop. He was Maggie's doctor. He became Maggie's doctor, essentially, the reason why they went there in the first place, and they just took him. And he saw the original doctor get thrown into the oven. He knows what that's about.
That is true.
So you have all these scattered reminders, and then seeing Dwight's face, his face of defeat, I think something happened. Something finally maybe clicked.
Right. So,
and I know that in the very next scene we see him kind of boozing out. And maybe the only thing that I can think of, because I'm trying to reconcile the next scene with what currently happened, and then what just happened beforehand, it feels great to save people. The only thing I could think of is that at the end of the day, he follows Dwight's advice, which is to do nothing, because all he can seem to do is drink.
Right. He is seriously drowning his sorrows. He's feeling his feelings, and he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder it's like you said before we started the show. I'm totally comfortable with seeing what happens next, because it can go anywhere from here. We have signs. We have signs where he can do this, that, or the other thing. The other thing being nothing. And I think definitely taking Dr. Carson to the Hilltop is off the table, but I can definitely say that he might be just taking Dwight's advice at the end of the day, because Dwight seems to know as soon as I stick my neck out, I'll just get it chopped off somehow or some way. As soon as I help somebody else suffers. As soon as I try to help both people, I'm the one who's going to end up suffering. So it makes me feel for him, and like I shouldn't, but it's like the Father Gabriel thing, you want to wonder how somebody like that survived this long, but at the same time, the show seems to drop little things that make you wonder. Like when you see Gregory whimpering, you feel for him in a weird way, even though he's such an
Yeah, but you do. Like, I felt very uncomfortable.
It's hard to watch somebody suffering, even though in my opinion, and maybe that's just the kind of person that I am. It's hard to see somebody suffering, even though you feel like they may not have killed people, that kind of thing. But they are such assholes. But at the same time, when you see them suffering it and really like feeling emotional turmoil, it's not easy to watch. And I think the show does a good job of illustrating that. So when we see all the examples of which Eugene really tries to be a contributing factor and see him essentially fail, you do feel for him. And I think maybe that's one of the key reasons why he doesn't rat out Dwight, is that because maybe he's right. Maybe do nothing, really is the best thing.
There is that point where Eugene is basically talking to Negan, touting all the things that, like, oh, well, he's got a plan for how to get them out of there, how to get rid of the walkers or whatever. And, Negan's just, eating it up and just sort of like, God, you are magnificent, and like, man, and this and whatever. And you get the impression that Eugene is ready to basically offer the information on Dwight. And, the lieutenants come in, and you can get the impression that Dwight was kind of waiting for it to happen. He was waiting for Eugene to do it, like he kind of like resigned himself that this is a possibility. And of course Eugene doesn't do it, he can't do it, because Eugene's not brave. And you can tell that Negan sort of like knows that there must have been something else that he was going to say, where he's like, all right.
Yeah, because I know we were talking about before, but his one pure act of bravery is defying Dwight and trying to save people. But I think maybe part of me thinks that having a taste of bravery and defying things has given him a sense of courage. Maybe it causes him to suffer, but I still think he wants to survive. But I think maybe he's had a taste for bravery, and he didn't get hurt from it.
Right.
So maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's not a matter of cowardice, but maybe there's like, I can be this way without throwing somebody under the bus. Which is why I agree with you. This is probably the most unknown I've ever felt about where this could go, because you have these three options and none of them are great, but none of them, there's no real indicator where this is going to go, because
it could go in any direction. Could go in any direction, which I like. I like the fact that it's keeping us on our toes. Like, I don't necessarily know what direction they're going to go with this.
Yeah, it's not just vague to be vague. There's a genuine investment in any of these three options. Yeah. But you know what else? What else really gets me is that it's something I noticed after watching the show a second time, is that the only time he mentioned something cranks his shaft, quote unquote. So the first time he mentioned it in this episode was surviving, and the second time he mentions it is when he covers for Dwight fixing the intercom system, and he says, "Oh, that kind of thing really cranks my shaft." It does make me think that that there's some sort of connection to that. You know, like you wouldn't say, like I know that even a writer wouldn't say something like that twice in the same episode if there wasn't some sort of significance.
Right.
You know, fixing the intercom. It could be something very small, like, you know, sparing you from Negan.
Right.
Really cranks my shaft, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It could mean that he has a plan. He doesn't like that he has to do it, which explains the next scene. Like, I don't like that I have to do this plan because it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to have to either kill people or have to throw it, or it's hard because in order to save everybody, I have to do something that's very hard. And it may even mean self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, because we have the imagery of Sasha, you know, so there's so many places where this can go. And it may even be a situation where Eugene is realizing that he has to sacrifice himself in order to get all these parties to not kill each other. There's so many places where this can go just simply because of these little illusions, you know? So they have done a very good job, and not just one of those brick wall kind of jobs where they just throw a brick wall in front of something and say, oh, you're not going to know what happens next. No, it's like they give you so many options that you're like not sure, and they're genuine ways out.
And they're genuine. They're completely they're completely feasible. Completely.
Yeah, and part of it, like it's funny because you wanna believe in the hype that Eugene is buying, you know, the whole saviors and Negan and committing to that cult, because that seems to be the obvious choice. He really does seem to want to save people, and he does seem to cling to Negan, right?
Yeah.
But part of me is like, oh, it's got to be misdirection, you know, like you know, he's really doing this, but he doesn't really want to do it, but blah blah blah. So it's going to turn out that he wants to do something awful, you know, like he's really with Rick, but like I don't think it's that simple, and I think the show illustrates that it's not that simple. Hence the boot and rally scene, you know.
Right. It is not that simple.
Yeah. So I really think that's like the most perfect place to leave this off on, you know, this whole Eugene centric episode, part of the episode, because we do have to touch on the Daryl part at least.
Yeah, I mean that was just stupid. I mean, I'm no, because I mean,
just stop talking about it because it makes me mad.
So that whole piece was just, I mean, you want to talk about believable and not believable.
Ooh,
I just have such a hard time reconciling the thought process and decision making that led them to this position. You have your fearless leader, unless, well, we know that Daryl and Rick are not seeing eye to eye. We know that.
Right.
We know that they've come to blows over it. They are in very different places on what they believe the best course of action is. And obviously, Daryl's kind of through listening to any sort of direction and orders. He's taking matters into his own hands. Right. But it's sort of like we've gone down this road before.
Right.
And haven't we learned that this sort of impulsive behavior, this reckless sort of behavior, usually doesn't amount to a whole lot of success? And
a couple times over, too.
Yes. And I mean, I'm glad that Rosita and Michonne came to their senses, but at the same time, I was like, you guys drove 2 hours to see the sanctuary and that was it. You know, you just wanted to go and see it. That seems like not the most logical thing to do, but okay. Yeah. You know. But Daryl and Tara just deciding to go in there, and Morgan too. Let's not forget that Morgan was there as sniper for them.
Yeah, I would like to start with that because it is kind of cool. To me, it's cool that Morgan is smart enough to know himself.
Yes.
Enough so that he can still participate. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that he stays purposefully far away from everybody to not be on the ground killing people because he's a fierce machine. I don't even think it's a political commentary, but there is something to be said about guns in general.
Right.
It's that a gun isn't the same as stabbing somebody or inflicting harm on somebody in person. It's an instant. No. It can be an instant kill machine.
It is. It's something that, I mean, and that's why a lot of people just don't necessarily respect people that fight using a gun as a weapon, because it's very easy to sit behind a tree or a rock and then just kind of pull out a gun and just fire at will, you know, like that's a very easy thing to do.
Right, and take somebody's wallet or something.
Right, yeah, sure, exactly. But the idea of being martial and being equipped to fight and defend yourself. I mean, we've seen our main characters being able to physically fight, you know?
Yeah.
We've always seen Rick do it, we've seen Michonne do it, we've seen Maggie do it, we've seen Carol do it, we've seen Jesus do it. Like, I mean, we've seen for the most part, most of our big characters are able to hold their own, basically.
Right. With or without.
With or without guns, it doesn't matter. And that's, that is the truth.
And especially Morgan, too. Morgan is a specific example, just like Jesus, because he uses guns and he uses martial arts or Aikido.
Right. Mm-hmm. So. And Morgan isn't necessarily the kind of character that always has a gun on them. Like, that's not his way. That is not his way.
I mean, it is now. Again.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah.
But it is the idea that he knows he can't be on the ground.
Right.
He knows he can't be facing people up close and personal because he will just be a killing machine.
Right.
And I think part of him needs to distance himself, literally, by sniping, in order to defend at the very least. Like, okay, I'm going to just make sure this gets done because I don't want to be that person again. There's just something beautiful about that,
Yeah.
And to know that he isn't broken.
No.
There's a malfunction.
Yes.
There's definitely a malfunction, but you do see him, and he does seem to be sober-minded at the very least.
Yeah.
He gets it. He knows what's wrong with him, and he works to correct it.
He understands, and he said it in that episode with Jesus, and I think it was such a good line when he said it, that I may not be all right, but I'm not wrong.
Exactly right.
And I think that was such an awesome line, because it's true. I mean, he definitely has his demons that he's dealing with, and he isn't necessarily all there, but he's not necessarily wrong in his thought process, because in reality, he's on the same page as Tara. He's on the same page as Daryl. Like, he's not alone in his thinking.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Like, he may not be as equipped as Tara and Daryl to do the thing. And I didn't realize that at the time how uniquely self-aware he was in that moment, because I assumed he was just gone for several episodes, because it seems like, I need to be gone,
right, exactly,
for a while, but to see him in that not in the next episode, but the episode after, tells me, that statement was more self-aware than I understood at first,
right?
And it's kind of beautiful, like, to see somebody, like, if you think about comparing Morgan, let's say, with Carol, because Carol was having a really, really hard time. Carol, look, I'm not, and I don't want people to think that I shit on Carol, because just speaking for myself, I know that sometimes it takes me a while to kind of come around to certain ideas or certain systems. It takes me a little while to adopt them. I need to get the rhythms, and I'm a lot like a Carol when it comes to getting over things. And Carol was out of the picture for a while.
Are you not good with change? Because I am terrible with change.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I'm not good with change. Like, in some ways I adopt to change really quickly. I sometimes embrace it and then go full into it. Like, I not only adopt change, but I embrace it and really fully adopt. But some things, like, it's like habits, right? Some habits are hard to break for me, and then I have to adopt certain systems, and they take a little while for me to acclimate to, but I work hard at it. And to really kind of crystallize this idea, in the past, when I've broken up with a girlfriend, let's say, it takes me a very long time to grieve. And that's just my way, and I accept it, because not accepting it and being really self-flagellating about it is harmful. And I learned that after a while.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I'm broken.
You're
this
mourning.
is just the way I am. I mourn. It takes me a little while. I get it out of my system. I learn something about myself after a while. I start picking the good memories, and that's just me. And so, and we do see the contrast between Carol and Morgan, because Carol has a really, really hard. She just needs to be alone for a long time. Yes. And then maybe she can re-enter a different way, which is ideal. I think people need to do that. And I think having Morgan snap back so quickly, at least, it shows us that all the training he did with Eastman, it's not gone. And that's something that I was very concerned about. It's not reverted to this. Yeah, there are triggers. You can't get over these things in a blink of an eye. But he has the tools to be able to come back. And I was surprised. I'm actually very surprised that we're focusing that much on Morgan here. But there is so much to be said about this idea. In our waking life,
Yeah, I mean, I think his belief system is not completely out the door, for sure. He hasn't thrown his belief system to the wayside in light of everything that's going on. Like, no, is it difficult? Sure, yeah.
Oh God, yeah. He knows himself enough to know what to do, to know what to stay away from, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's knowing yourself.
But getting back to the crew, though, it's to the Terrell crew, which is what I'm going to call it, just the way it is.
Makes sense.
As much as I agree with you completely, and I think that the writers kind of write it that way. Yeah. Like, they want you to be like, what are you doing? Stop it. Like, they make it very obvious too. Like, it's what are you doing? And why are you putting yourselves in harm's way? It's the classic wolf behind you thing. You're like, why don't you see it?
Why are you running into the woods?
Yeah, exactly. Look behind you. Like, they don't know. You have to kind of appreciate how Rosita says something. Like, she has learned from this situation.
Yes.
It was hard for her to say what she said. You know, like, because she is the mama to the Abraham Papa to Eugene's son thing. Like, she was fierce, man. She was capable and fierce and is ruthless, and she wants to protect everybody. She wants to be a mama bear. You know, she went to the sanctuary with Sasha. She did that. She tried to take out Negan with that bullet. She got punished for that. She kept trying.
Yeah,
she did not stop.
Nope.
So to have her admit that is very powerful. You know, not powerful enough to stop. I'm going to say Daryl. Sorry.
Daryl.
But it was powerful enough for Michonne. You have to kind of appreciate that the writers left a little room for sanity, you know, like, or for bravery, let's say. Even.
Yeah. When this whole scene was unfolding, I just thought to myself, especially in the case of Rosita, it's like, we've been down this road. You went down this road with Sasha. Are we really going to do this again? So I'm glad that she kind of came to her senses. Michonne came to her senses, and, you know, Daryl did what they did. Honestly, I feel like Daryl was a little apprehensive about doing this, but I think Tara egged him on. He seemed to be sitting kind of like in that van, like, just a little apprehensive about what he was about to do.
Yeah, and you kind of see that actually, and I didn't even write this down, but I thought I was going to, and I said, like, I won't write it down. But when Michonne actually leaves, when she actually backs out in the end, and she says some really cool things about that as well. She says, I originally wanted to come here because I wanted to see that things are working. And she realized that I don't get to decide that, you know, like, I don't have control of that. All I can hope is that it's going to work. But now that I'm here, I see that things are working now. What you're doing right now could jeopardize that. Yeah. And like you said, it does make him pause. And what really makes me think it makes him pause, it's this little one thing, and I don't even know if it's actually a real thing, kind of like when Morgan flipped out and Tara made that face. It could be an actor flub. But as she's leaving the truck and she closes the door, Daryl kind of flinches a little bit because he is staring out into space. And you know, it shows to me that he's listening to her, and he's letting her go. He's not giving her any guff about it. No. But then as she slams the door, he kind of jumps just a little bit to make me think that, like, she has reached him in a way. You know, even though they end up committing what they commit, you know, he's committed. You know, it does make me think it reached him in a way, and maybe that might play out later. Something tells me that Dwight and Daryl are going to butt heads. Tara's going to get involved, and I literally wrote, Tara is like literally the devil on Daryl's shoulder. Yeah,
she's just a little,
jumping around with a pitchfork, you know, eager, smiling.
Yeah,
she's
like,
doing
come on,
this.
we can do it. Like, don't listen to them. We got this.
Yeah, and you. We'll just poke him in the tuchus, you know, like, with my little pitchfork.
I wanted to shake Tara in this episode.
Not even shake. Like, when you get beyond that and you're, like, almost afraid of her because she's so enthralled with this plan.
And
you know, like, I'm a little, like, backing away slowly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, come on, Daryl. I'm like, you have been through some battles, through some serious stuff. I'm like, Tara has not. Tara has seen a fraction of what you've seen. You know, she hasn't been in the midst of the kind of battles with, like, the governor and with the freaking termites and, you know, and now, you know, this and whatever. It's like, you know, you've been in some stuff.
You've had to kind of cut your brother off and then see that he kind of saved you in the end, that sort of thing. Or, you know,
I mean, you've gone through some serious stuff. Whereas Tara, I'm like, I just find her so flighty in terms of her personality that I'm just like, you know, like, if I was in the Rick Grimes team,
a character takedown by Carol.
I'm sorry, if I was in the Rick Grimes team, I feel like we'd be in Alexandria hanging around, and Tara comes over and says hi and starts talking, and in your head, you should be thinking, why are you still here? How are you still here? You know, it's like.
But you know what? It made me think of something watching it the second time around. And there's two things. There's two operating principles. One I just thought of now, but another which I wrote down. And let me get to the one I wrote down first. You have to kind of take into account a couple of things. One is that, yes, Denise was just senselessly taken out by Dwight. Right. I get that. Okay.
I was pretty shocked.
That's part of it. The second part of that first part is that she was totally duped by the governor. And I'm glad you mentioned him.
Yeah,
you know?
she was very much.
And there's, you know, and you know how it is when you've been duped by somebody.
Yeah.
You feel
deceived.
Awful.
Yeah.
You feel like you could have done something about it. You could not have imagined how much you were taken for a ride.
Yeah.
And the way it was done was probably the most horrible thing, the thing that probably stuck with her the most.
Yeah.
And probably the reason why she misses Glenn the most. And it was the idea that who is this guy that cuts off this old defenseless man's head?
Yeah.
You know, so it made me flash flash to that moment, and it made me think, if I was Tara, I would probably be thinking the same way. I'm just sick and tired of making the wrong mistakes.
Yeah.
Being tricked, being behind the curve, not feeling like I can hold my own and able to contribute. And the second part of this analysis is that, the analysis juice, is that, are you sick of it yet? Is that it allows you to flip back to Eugene.
Right.
You know? And how these two contrasting characters are really trying to play these strengths. You know, Tara is trying to embrace this idea of, I'm just sick and tired of sitting on my ass being tricked, you know, being not being contributing, you know, trying to fit this mold. And I really have to start embracing a little bit of this brutality and not be so soft, because people are dying, you know. Like, I just want to get it. And all these people are thinking the same thing, but they're going about it they're different
in very
ways.
very different ways.
Yeah, but she embraces this one thing, which is to I just need to get it done. Daryl's on board. He just needs to get it done too, for different reasons, obviously, you know. So, and they're doing it for themselves, you know, a little bit. You know, Tara has her own reasons. Like, she's doing it because of this. Daryl's doing it because it's payback. You know, Michonne's doing it because she just wants Rick to be safe in the future, to be set in stone. Rosita she's got too many reasons, you know. So it's just fascinating to see these two comparisons between Tara and Tara and Eugene. Like, seeing the desire to be a contributing member, but also to be brave, you know, like to not be duped anymore, to not live under heel, you know. And she's carving her own path, whereas Eugene is just embracing the path that's been laid out in front of him. So it's just interesting to see those two things together.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and as we know, Daryl and Tara drive that truck into the sanctuary, and all hell breaks loose.
Ooh boy. Let's talk about just that for now, because we see the scene where they kind of enter the place, and we know that they're kind of limited to the bottom floor because the stairs are piled up with too many walker bodies, right?
Yes.
But I'll tell you what I feel right off the bat. Okay. And that's I do feel like at the end of the day, in spite of all us trying to say stop doing this, I feel like part of me thinks that it's a net good. Like, yeah, it's stupid and what they do is reckless, but I think part of me thinks that had they not done it, they would not have, first of all, they would not have known that this plan would work. Right. I don't think the workers are harmed, but what I do think is that it really accelerated the plan. Right. You know, it really solidified the plan. There's a part of me that is worried that it ruined it in some ways. Like, maybe the garbage truck crashing into the factory floor also accelerated Negan's escape to the bullet making factory, let's say. Yeah. It gave him a means to do that.
And that's my speculation.
Right.
That is totally my speculation.
It's like that, literally almost a double-edged sword. You know, you may have accelerated the process, but you also gave Negan an out.
You gave him an opening to escape, and I fully believe that they did. And
glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't happen all the time.
It doesn't happen all the time, but we are in line. I don't want to get into what I think until we get more towards the end and talk more predictions, because for the next episode, because I do have my suspicions on what I think happened, because obviously, you know, in the end we see Rick looking and seeing the aftermath of what happened. He sees the truck crashed into the wall, and everything is empty. Everybody's gone. The walkers are gone. There's no people around.
He must be thinking in that moment too. But let's pause for a second and start from the top of that, because we see Rick in the shipping container. I finally figured out the word. By the way, remember I was struggling with it last week? Yes. And I was like, the thing with the walls and it's metal.
I was like, I get it. I know what you're talking about.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, yeah, you do. But at the time, I didn't really know language at 2 a.m. We have to appreciate how strange these people are too. They really literally just take him out to take a couple of old-timey photos with of him. So bizarre. Before, you know, and then the sketches to sculpt him later for after.
For after.
After what?
Yeah, like after.
Sculpt you.
So strange. People are so strange, and I don't understand.
Weird. I'm kind of like liking it in a weird way now. I don't know why.
It's so bizarre. Because it's so bizarre. Like it's past the point of slightly
of understanding
witty.
Even.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense. I mean, we're not that far removed from the apocalypse that there's no comprehension of the English language anymore. Like, it makes no sense.
I want these people to be former members of the Church of Scientology for some reason. Like, that'd be great. L. Ron Hubbardists or something.
That would be great. I would love for something like that. It's like, yes.
And
exactly.
how willing would you be to accept that at that point? Like, okay, I get it now.
And then I'd be like,
fine.
yep. Oh yeah,
I'm on board.
Because then I'd feel like, okay, now we have some sort of inkling. Because otherwise, it's like, how are all these people dressed in black garb and talking like this? I need to understand why. This is like the first cultish group that we've seen. You know?
Yeah. It's that you really literally there's nobody in the show that has been remotely that way at all, except for the wolves. Let's we have to mention the wolves too, because the wolves had their own way.
Yeah, but they had their own way, and they basically they went in and they stormed in and they killed people and they come to get things, but they at least spoke in sentences. Like it just made more sense.
That's
the
true.
The wolves I understood. These people don't understand.
Wow.
Don't.
But actually, so here's the question of the day, Carol. If you had to be locked in the room with Jadis or locked in the room with the wolves, who would you rather be locked in the room with?
I guess Jadis.
See?
I'm gonna guess Jadis. Yeah.
You gotta pick your lesser of two evils here, man.
Yeah.
Like as much as you get brutality because of this show, because it teaches you what brutality is.
Yes.
I would opt for Strange over brutality, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I'll take Strange. I'll take Strange.
I'll take comic relief for 1, Alex, for 100.
God, so strange.
Yeah.
But yes, he's in the hot box in the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, Daryl style. I love that callback. I love that he's being treated practically the same way. Literally, the door of the trailer had the A on it.
Yeah.
Just like Daryl had the A on it. It's very weird. It's very. I don't know what they're doing. Are they emulating? Are they playing a copycat game? And, I know I kind of had this theory last week about how they're the bigger threat.
Right.
But maybe I'll scale it back a little. I still think they're a threat. I think they're formidable. They're obviously formidable. They have like a different kind of strength,
right.
In character and in their ability to move in and out of situations and have a hive mind almost. They're almost leading by committee too, if you've noticed.
Yes, it's very weird.
Like Jadis isn't necessarily kind of the leader. They do kind of take it, They each have kind of an input.
Mm-hmm.
In large part, she is kind of leading. I just noticed hints of like them not having too much of a central leadership. Like this guy chimes in, that guy chimes in. This guy says you should do that. Like doesn't say anything, but he kind of alludes that hold on a second. Like I'm doing this. Like I'm still sketching. That sort of. So I feel like she does. They do listen to her. Listen as if they talk, but they do kind of talk. They kind of pay attention to her moves because they do respect her. But I think it strikes me that they might be leading a little bit by committee. Like some of these guys, like even the guy that said something about dreams the other week.
Oh yeah.
Like when I looked at him and I listened to him, like, oh, could this guy be the secret leader, the leader above her? Because he kind of spoke like that. He spoke like he was some sage of some kind, So I don't know. I thought it was noteworthy. The strangeness in this group. I'm just still trying to figure them out, and these little things kind of fascinate me.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's just very bizarre.
So time for after. I guess this is what they meant by after, using
Winslow 2.0,
beta Winslow, like what they thought of before Winslow, before Rick took down Winslow.
So strange.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a minor version of him, like proto. Sorry, I should have said proto Winslow. Like we thought of this idea first, so we might as well trot him out now.
Why not?
Yeah, he's more mobile than Pitt Winslow. So
yes,
I find it fascinating. First of all, when they first open the door to the shipping container, Rick still gives him a chance. Which again, so fascinating. He could have just said anything. He could have painted this a completely different way.
Yeah,
he could have been begging for his life for all I know. But he does it then, and he does it still after he defeats Proto Winslow. And all these people like almost getting shot by Jadis.
Yeah.
He still gives them an out.
He still does.
And it does say something about how desperate he is for his people. Like, I think that moment with Baby Daddy and Gracie, it does kind of go back to that, like how much he snapped out of it and how committed he is to not having people die again under his watch, And not only that, but to be less indiscriminate. Because he could have killed all those people, by the way.
Yeah.
All those people he kind of knocked out and took down. He could have killed Jadis, too, and just forced the rest of them to kind of come to reason.
Yeah.
But he
pretty much, no.
And they would have respected it too. Like he could have done that and gotten them to come along. I'm firmly convinced that you could have just taken Jadis out of the equation and gotten them to come along.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree.
But there is something to be said about him giving them a chance. And it kind of goes back to the plan. The plan hinges on the idea that we're going to starve them out. We're not going to necessarily kill all of them.
Right.
You know, that's not what a new world is going to bring about. You know, we need to kind of give them a chance.
I agree.
She does say, join you. What then?
And here comes the bargaining.
Yeah, here comes the, what do I get out of it sort of thing.
Oh, Jesus.
And it's kind of amazing to me that she agrees to a fourth of the take, which is also interesting because you have Alexandria, Hilltop Kingdom, and now you have the Junkyard Gang. Mm-hmm. So it would be Jock? Stop getting in my jock, Carol.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, well, you know, I expect as much. But yeah, it's nice to see that Rick's patience paid off. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
If she could have just done it all over again, and I would have been right, and I didn't want to be right about the Junkyard Gang being the bigger threat. But you know, thank God. But then it's like you were about to say before. It's they agree to a small party to check out, to survey the damage, to see if they're really all going to come together.
Right.
And they get to one lookout post, and they see that at the lookout post, one of the guys is hanging upside down and being eaten by walkers, and he's trying to get people on the walkie, and nobody's answering. And that worries me the most, actually, even more than him seeing the sanctuary empty. I just want to know what you think about that, because
about the fact that he didn't get through to anybody on the walkie-talkies.
Yeah, because that seems to be more relevant to me than the sanctuary.
I mean, well, I think it's all connected. I mean, I feel like the concern there is like, what happened to those snipers? I mean, obviously we see one of them clearly was, being eaten by like walkers, but that's kind of like the question. It's like, what happened? Who got to these people? Like, did they run? Because we don't know how long of time transpired between the time that Daryl and Tara drove the truck into the sanctuary and when Rick comes, and when Rick comes and sees the aftermath. We don't know how much time passed in between those 2 points. So what happened? I don't know. Like, I mean,
you're on the same page, because I wrote that down as well. I'm like, oh, this could be one of those things where he'd been captured, he'd been in there for like at least a day plus, and we know that all this stuff happened not within a day, but like the walkers had been there at least a night, starving them out and stuff like that. Yeah. So we're on the same page. Like, we don't know how many days / hours plus he's been there, and so it makes me think that he could be coming out a full day or half a day after they ran the garbage truck.
And that's a really interesting point, because I'd be curious to see time-wise, how does that work? Like, it's no secret there's a lot of like still images from like the mid-season finale and things like that, and we don't
know
see
that much.
Right. I don't see too many images of Rick in the photos. I don't. So it makes me wonder, from a timing perspective.
Oh shoot.
Maybe Rick was in that shipping container for I mean, I don't know, maybe a day, let's say.
But maybe longer, you're saying.
Or who knows? But maybe a lot transpired during that time that he was there. Eugene enacted his plan, whatever that plan was, to get Negan and maybe some of the lieutenants out of harm's way, and some of the workers and all of that, and lead the herd away somehow. I don't know how, but maybe all that happened, and whatever sort of counterattack, because there's going to be a counterattack. Like, let's no, not trying to spoil anything, but let's be realistic. It's like there will be some sort of pushback for this.
And we did get a sneak peek of that too.
We did get there was
a hint of that.
A hint of it, yes. So I mean, I wonder if all of that happens while Rick's in that storage container, and when he comes out, we're seeing the aftermath of whatever it was that happened. I wonder, because we don't know how much time really transpired at the point that he sees this. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
You took what I wrote down to actually another level. I'd assumed, but I wasn't about to say it, but now I'm going to, is that the amount of time that passed was enough time for Negan to get Eugene to the factory, but not to get to Alexandria. That's not what I was thinking. But now you're making me think that this may be on post.
I'm just throwing it out there, because if I think about like the still images that I've seen a lot of images of almost every other person other than Rick. I think I've seen like maybe one photo of Rick, I get the impression that the photo that I saw was more along the lines of Rick arriving at Alexandria, but everything that potentially happened has already happened. So I don't know if he gets there in time for whatever it is that transpires, but I do believe that we're going to have an understanding of what this whole let my mercy prevail above my wrath. Like, I think that teary-eyed scene that in the flash in the first episode, I think we're going to see it.
The flash forward that we saw in the first episode.
When
one
he's
of them
all
at least.
the one where he's all teary-eyed and says the whole like, may my mercy prevail over my wrath. I think that that's happening in this episode coming up. I do.
No.
So I think that he is going to arrive and see something that he is going to shake him to his core. And while we're on the topic, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say it right now. I wish I had a bell. I so wish I had a bell. I'm going to get one from Amazon.
Okay.
So, no, here's what I'm saying. I feel that my prediction is that Eugene enacts his plan, gets him out of there. I think that they do go to Alexandria. I personally think that they will bomb Alexandria. I think that they don't necessarily have the weapons that they had, but I think that they might throw like grenades or something. Because
Eugene made grenades or something.
Could be, because I mean the images that I've seen, especially the ones at nighttime, it looks like there's like light on their faces. It almost gives me the impression of almost like a fire. The light that would be reflected of a fire. Yeah. So I feel
explosion. Right.
Yes, I feel like they may not have their weapons, but I think that they might concoct some sort of explosives because it can be done. And I mean, Eugene is one of those anarchist cookbook type guys that I'm sure he can.
The Jolly Roger.
If I ever saw one, So it's like, I'm sure, he could probably come up with some sort of concoctions of explosives that they could use. So I think that they do that. And I think that Rick doesn't arrive until the aftermath of when it's all said and done. And I think that we're going to see Judith and Carl dead.
Ooh. See, I was thinking Judith, but
I don't. Okay, but here's the caveat to it. I think that we're going to see Judith and Carl dead, but I think that it's going to be a fake out, and Carl's not really going to be dead.
Oh yeah,
but we're not going to.
But
we're not going to find out until February.
Ooh, that's so cruel.
That's basically what I think they're going to do. I think the aftermath will be that we'll see Carl and Judith laid out like as if they're dead, and I think Judith will be, and I think that Carl might survive, but we won't know that until they come back in February.
Hey, you know what the good news is? Mm-hmm. We'll see a baby Walker.
Oh no.
Hey, you got to take advantage of it, Not a lot of babies in this world.
No, that would be so disturbing. That would be, stop it. No.
So cruel.
But no, that is, I have thought about it long and hard. I have studied the images. I have thought about this, and that's what I'm going with. Because we know that they're like, the shocker, the moment it's going to be so shocking, whatever. I think that that's what it is. I think that that's what it is. Because think about it. There is no, thank you. There is no other character death to me that would be like as shocking as Rick's children. I don't think so. I don't think that there's any other character. Gabriel dying is not a shocker.
Right.
Like any of these other characters dying would not be some sort of like,
right.
Like,
but it's kind of shock. Yeah, they're on their way out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it wouldn't. I mean, it would be surprising, but it wouldn't be shocking. But I know that there are a lot of people that say like the shocking moment may not necessarily be a death. It may be the whole, where is this helicopter? What is this helicopter about? That potentially could be the shocking portion too, which is
oh my. Yeah.
I'm hoping, because it's like I need to know more about that helicopter.
And who knows if we are going to know more about that?
I know. I'm hoping.
And they could do that, by the way. They could just not have it.
I know.
That would be an acceptable move.
They've done that before. They've done that before. I mean, we haven't seen Heath. Heath is the one flying the helicopter. That's the surprise. Heath is going to come in on a helicopter.
Comes out in a full 2-button suit or whatever, and 3-piece suit.
Straight from the set of 24, ready to like
good one.
Come in and save everybody. It's going to be Heath. Heath is in the helicopter.
So good.
Oh, yeah. That's the shocker.
I was working for the government the entire time.
Working for the
government of Saudi Arabia.
The whole time. That's it. And there's your crossover.
Revolution.
With 24.
Oh yeah, with 24. My bad. Sorry, I just started to bleed all these three things at once.
Yeah.
The government's turned off all electricity.
Oh, God. But yeah, that's basically what I think. I sincerely, like, the more I think about it, the more I think that Rick may have been in that trailer for some time. I don't know. It's totally possible. Like, they like to play around with time like that sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily know. Like,
this further solidifies this whole tantric death thing, because if Judith and Carl are the ones that are taken out, it would be major. It would be a huge blow.
It would be a huge blow. It would be, and I mean, like I said, it's like I do think that the Judith death is very much on the table, just because Judith isn't alive in the comics at this point.
Right.
She already has been killed during the governor's raid on the prison. So, like, at the end of the day, like, that's very much an option. And in the case of Carl, I think it would be a fake out. I think it would be a situation where we're left kind of hanging like, oh my God, is he dead too? And then we find out maybe afterwards that he did make it. Because I don't think that Carl would be killed off. I think that Carl is way too of an important character to necessarily be killed off. But I think the fact that Rick repeats what Sadiq said of the line about mercy, I just feel like that was a moment between him, Sadiq, and Carl.
Yeah,
so
these three different types of characters.
Yeah.
You know, what is it? In Dungeons and Dragons, it's the good, the like bad, good, and the bad kind of characters. I don't remember exactly what it is, but you have these like mixtures of 6 different type of archetypes.
Yes.
But the major 3 ones are the rightful good, the wrongful good, that kind of thing,
yes.
and then like the wrongful wrong, that kind of thing. Those are the major 3 that most people like to play out of the 6. But
yes.
you see the different types, and it's the extremes, but also the middle that Rick tries to walk, you know?
Right. He tries to maintain that line of fairness, you know?
Yeah.
He tries to kind of justice. He was a sheriff, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that something like that happening would be something that could shake him, that would obviously shake him to his core and bring him to that point. Because I feel like that's the other thing that I was reading, that it's like, oh, it was death as shocking as Glenn's. I was like, what other death could be as shocking as what happened with Glenn? That was, you know, pretty unforgettable. No, that was not something that has been forgotten and won't be. But in terms of like on that level of something that would really leave a lasting impression, I gotta think that would be it. Or
as we're talking about it, the only other thing I could think of is that it would be more along the lines of Carl actually losing that arm, you know, after 2 threats, you know?
Yeah, could be.
That would really stick with Rick too. Along with Judith.
No. Anything happening to his children would definitely be a huge blow. So even if it's a situation like that where Carl isn't killed but severely injured, for sure.
Mortally injured, but severely disfigured, right?
And the thing is, it's like the show has done those moments, and they've taken them from the comic fairly well. Like when they had the situation with the Horde in Alexandria and Sam
taking away a kid. I mean, they're not afraid to do that.
No, but also in the sense that, like, you know, when Carl was having his little scuffle with the older brother, and Michonne kills him, but you know, not in time before he shoots him, and you see Carl turn and turn around and you realize that he's been shot through the eye. And I remember, again, side tangent, there's a show on Bravo, because you know I do watch horrible television also, besides like wonderful scripted television. But so there was a show on Bravo called The People's Couch, and it is one of the best shows ever, because all it is basically watching people watching the same shows we watch on their couch and basically seeing their reaction. That's all it is. It's like they basically have some different households and they're all watching the same program and the same episode. And they just basically see the different reactions that these different households are having on what they're watching. One of the episodes was that they had like these few different households and they were watching that particular episode of The Walking Dead, which I think it was like a mid-season premiere, or I don't know. It was one of the major episodes when the whole Horde thing happened and Carl got shot in the eye. And there was this one household that was hilarious because it was like a wife, a father, and their teenage son. And Carl got shot in the eye, and you see it, and it's like, the teenage son is like mouth open, like, the wife puts her head in her hands, and like the husband stands up and is like, that's it, I'm done with this. Someone walks out.
I think that's how a lot of people end their relationship with The Walking Dead. That's what happens. The three different archetypal reactions.
Exactly. But that was another moment that was like, yeah, that was one that was like, like I remember sitting, because I read the comic, but I did not see it happening that they were going to do it. I did not see it happening. And when it did happen, I was like, oh, wow, they're going there. I didn't see it coming.
It was dramatic too. Like it was super dramatic.
It was super dramatic, the way that it was done. So I'm very curious to see how they do this, because I think, they've had some moments that have been obviously very dramatic, very impactful in the way that it's been done, and the material and the story of exactly what they do, but the way that they do it too. Because it doesn't have to be some kind of grotesque thing. It doesn't have to be about that. Honestly,
even though when they shot Carl's eye out, it was particularly pronounced, and I think that was a good thing. I don't think they should have brushed the fact he got his eye shot out.
The Glenn thing was grotesque. Like the Glenn death was.
It was grotesque, but not it was beyond.
I could not watch it. I could not watch that.
I had a hard time, but I did watch it.
It was very difficult to watch something like that. It was painful, and so that stuck with me for all the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
And I'm sure, and I know a lot of people got rubbed the wrong way with it, and all that, but I think that there are ways to do things that are just really like, when Herschel was killed, God, everybody remembers that, like that was huge. So I'm curious to see what they do and how they do it.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said before. They've left it in such a place that it's hard to speculate where they're going to go with next, because they've laid out paths. It's one thing to leave it unknown.
Yes.
But it's a whole other thing to kind of lay out different tracks that they can chug their choo-choo train over, and go that way.
Yes.
It's like this almost misdirection too, because they may go in a completely different direction that we won't see coming. And you guys. So I just said a curse word. So now we have to put explicit lyrics.
That's fine. Sometimes it has to be said.
Or I guess I can bleep it out, but you never know. I might just leave it in there.
Sometimes it has to be said. I try to be very good with my language when we have these podcasts, but it's sometimes it's hard.
That's why I'm here, because then I'll do it for you.
And it'll give me free reign.
Exactly. You can just be you. He did it.
Okay. Get comfortable now. Awesome.
Yeah, somebody did it for me.
Yes. Broke the ice.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I didn't write down any real sneak peeks, because I didn't really see any except for in Talking Dead, and even then it was just them at Alexandria, I believe, right?
Yeah, there are a few trailers that are out right now. I think that there's one with Maggie and Jesus, which kind of let's talk about it. It gives you the same ominous kind of feeling as when Glenn was killed, because they did the same thing. The saviors had knocked down trees to basically block off the roads. It's the same. It's their MO, which is why Maggie kind of immediately is pretty much aware that it's them. They're retaliating back. They're out. It definitely gives you that kind of ominous sort of feeling that something ain't right.
It's a callback, and it's a terrifying one.
It's a terrifying callback to that first episode last season. So it's very that's jarring. Now there's another trailer with Enid and Aaron.
Okay.
Now
talk to me. I'm interested.
Enid is always a wild card to me. Always a wild card to me, because I don't, not in a bad way. I just don't know. I don't have her figured out quite yet, and I don't know necessarily, because I haven't really looked at the trailer in detail, but from what I've seen, it's her and Aaron in the car, and I think that they trade off driving, and then she's driving, she's in the driver's seat, and I think that then she takes a turn or something and says that she has something that they need or something, but I don't know what that is.
Come on.
I don't know what that what does that mean? I don't know. What do you need? You need a lot, but what? So I don't know necessarily what all that's about. And then I think that the last trailer is at Alexandria. I think it has Carl and Michonne at Alexandria and Negan at the gates, which I think we got a little bit of a sneak peek of that when they did a whole trailer during the summer at Comic-Con, because I think that they showed in that mishmash of different images, I think that at one point they showed Alexandria at nighttime, as if you were looking through a peephole and you could see Negan like walking by, you know? I think that image is like the same one having to do with Negan at the gates this time around. But I think he says when he's at the gates, like, you know, if you don't let him in or open the gate, he's gonna just freaking blow up Alexandria. Yeah. So I do feel that they have some sort of weaponry. I do. I feel like they have explosives, and I think they're going to use them. I do.
Thanks, Eugene.
Yeah, exactly. But this relates to having blood on his hands.
Yeah.
He will have blood on his hands. Like, I mean, if he, in fact, helps them be able to replenish their ammunition and get explosives, it's like that is on his shoulders. That is his burden to carry. He created that situation. So
yeah, it's kind of like what I said in the episode before, and I alluded to this in the beginning of the show, is that I did not want to be right about Eugene, but I really do feel that he, unlike what you were saying about him in the comics, you know, having some bravery, this is a very big departure. Very big departure. Yeah, my feeling was that as a TV viewer is that I kind of thought he was going to lean in. This episode indicates that he was leaning in. Part of me was leaving the door open, obviously with the whole letting Dwight go and maybe doing nothing, you know, like maybe end up doing nothing. But my feeling, my gut is telling me that, like, as much as Chris Hardwick really wants him to kind of turn around, I just don't see that happening.
I don't see that happening.
I'm too clear-eyed, you know?
I don't see that happening. I think that he is 100% Negan. I think that is a big departure from the character in the comics, and I think that's fine. I think it keeps it interesting, to be honest with you know?
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely an interesting turn to see, well, now what happens to Eugene?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, now what happens with the show?
Number one. Yeah. I mean, he's public enemy number one, basically.
Oh, God.
I mean, he is
hated by all Alexandrians, even further.
Poor Josh McDermott. He is hated by, like, God. I mean, he gets hate mail. Like,
he's so funny, too. Like, he's such a fun guy.
He is such a funny guy. I feel so bad. I'm like, I'm glad. Like, Chris Hardwick always says, he's like, guys, this isn't a documentary. Like,
this isn't a true telling, you know?
No.
Historical fact.
Yeah. I think he had to shut down his Twitter at a certain point. Like,
oh my God, really? Shoot.
Yeah. Like, he was just like getting bombarded with stuff.
See, I think he should lean in. That's the thing. Like, you know, I know it's hard for people because when you have the entire world throwing hate at you, I'm sure it's hard. But, like, in my opinion, I think he really should lean in, and I think that would get people to back off a little bit.
I think that, I think you have to know how to approach it. Like, I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan embraces it, and he's sort of like,
he's loved for it too. What's up with that?
Because I think he's a very charming villain. He's
also
very
pretty sick, let's be honest.
No comments.
Dude, I'm married too, so I can,
I know, I'm not dead, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're not dead from the waist down. You know what's up.
I know. But he's very charming. He's very, very charming.
Yeah.
I will leave it at that. but no,
you're
it's
too
like
good for me, Carol. You're too good. I'll admit it, and I'm a guy, and I'm the heterosexual male, and I'll be
good
like,
for you.
He's got some swagger to him that I can definitely dig.
He does. He knows how to carry himself, and it's funny because he's made the role suited to him. Because I've said it before. It's like I was very skeptical at first because I knew what Negan looked like in the comics, and I knew what he was inspired of. You know who inspired the Negan character, right?
No, I do not.
Kirkman was a big. You remember Henry Rollins back in the day?
Yeah.
The metal. That was his inspiration. Kirkman drew up Negan and designed Negan based off of Henry Rollins. That was his inspiration. And if you look at images in the comic of Negan, you totally see it. You totally see it. But the funny thing was that then, you know, they're bringing Negan to life. Henry Rollins is now, you know, older in acting. You know, he's you know, he's not just a metalhead anymore. So he tried for the role and he didn't get it. And he's like, how did I not get the role that was created based off of me?
I was birthed to play. Yeah, exactly.
Like, are you kidding me?
I didn't know that he tried out for the role. He's generally like a really good guy.
Yes.
But you know, thinking about him, like I really can't see him playing that role. Like I can see him.
It would have been a different portrayal altogether. It would have been a different portrayal. That's the thing. Like I think that Jeffrey Dean Morgan has taken that character and made it his own. And I think that Henry Rollins would have been great, but it would have been a very different interpretation of the character.
And personally, I think for all his quirks, he's just a generally honest. He's true to himself kind of guy, like even with everything that he does, comedy, spoken word,
yeah,
you know, all of the things that he does. So I just don't see him acting that way. I can see him being, but him being cruel is hokey to me.
The thing in the Negan in the comics was more of a brute force kind of guy, and you know, with the leather jacket, the hair, and everything. Like Jeffrey Dean Morgan has made Negan to be like this very kind of charming, manipulative, sort of mind game sort of guy. Like he's not a formidable figure in stature. You know what I mean? Like he's not some big dude. Like Henry Rollins is a big dude. Negan in the comics is this big guy. If you were to take straight from comic to screen, it definitely would have made sense to have somebody like Henry Rollins. So that's why at first I was like, really? Jeffrey Dean Morgan? Like I was kind of like, But he's definitely made it his own, and I like his interpretation. Like I like what he's done with it, you know?
It's almost like a complete reinvention, right?
Yes.
Like that makes way more sense.
Makes way more sense. Because a lot of the complaints that people have, which makes sense, is that, you know, you can't necessarily take certain things straight from the comics and put it onto screen and it's going to work. It just doesn't directly correlate that way. Like you have to kind of reinterpret it in a little bit of a different way to make it relevant, you know, and make it believable.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
Like, as believable as it can be in a zombie apocalyptic show. You know, like, I mean, you know.
It's suspension of disbelief, right? But
right. Exactly.
But I have to ask you a question though. Then, because do you generally get the idea or the sense that the comics readers embrace this Negan on the TV show?
I think now they do. I think at first
they didn't at first?
I don't think at first. I think at first people were kind of like, I think that they were really excited to see the character, but they were a little apprehensive. And I think that at first, I don't think that the show did a great job in giving him a lot of good dialogue. I mean, I think that, you know, he came in, you know, he killed Glenn and Abraham, and then it was like, oh, you know, it set this like really somber tone. And then you have like, you know, these episodes where he's just kind of basically beating up on downtrodden Daryl and Rick, and it was just a lot. I feel like he didn't start to really shine until you got these one-on-one episodes, like when he had his time with Carl, or when he had his episode with Sasha, or with Eugene. When we had those one-on-one episodes, I think that's when he really, really had an opportunity to shine. But when he had those episodes where he's like kind of in Alexandria and bossing everybody around, and like, like it was just a lot of posturing that was like, okay, I get it. It felt a little excessive. Like, okay, I get it. You're a jerk. You're an I get it. You know, it just felt too much, especially because there were a lot of those episodes that were extended episodes. There were numerous episodes that season that were like 90 minutes or whatever. And it was just sort of like, I don't need 90 minutes of this. I didn't need 90 minutes of this.
Yeah, of me biting my nails and having heart palpitations, by the way.
Yeah, like this is just too much, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that now they've kind of, and there's certain things that become a running joke because he does this lean back thing a lot and it's become a joke. Like he even said it. It's like, great. You know, like he's like, I don't know, I did it a couple of times and it just kind of stuck, and now like it's become like a running joke. It's like Negan and his lean back kind of thing, you know?
Back, show my balls. It's that kind of thing.
That is very much comic book though. That is very.
Is it though? Okay. And that's what I was wondering, the contrast of those two characters, like how they contrast. Like so
the vulgarity
so are you saying...
is very on point with the comic book.
Oh, okay. For
sure.
But the one thing that I was wondering was because you mentioned the time with Sasha, the time with Carl, did that take place in the comics?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
In almost like and if I think about the time with Sasha and the time with Carl, that's almost exactly like almost word for word how it happened. Like his time with Sasha in the cell when Rapey Davy tries to attack her and he basically like, you know, murders him and all that. Like directly happens in the comic. That happens exactly as it happens in the show, happened in the comics. The situation with Carl, when Carl sneaks to the sanctuary and shoots up some guys and he kind of takes them under his wing, takes them around, exact same thing happens, you know? So he shines very much in those episodes because you get to see more of his depth and he's not just a caricature. That's the thing. It's like, I feel like he's more developed now. He has more dimension, and that's kind of what he needed, because otherwise then it just becomes kind of cartoonish, you know?
Or comic book bookish, let's just say. Like
Right.
it lends a lot more believability in reality, or as much reality as we can get from a fictional television show. But
it's a
that's good
different
to know.
medium. It's a different medium, so you have to adapt it. It can't be the same, otherwise it just comes off as hokey.
Right. As often comics will sometimes do, exaggerate it, right?
But is it believable in a comic because it has to jump off the pages for you? It has to. It's not like a novel where you can go into some sort of like long monologues, describing something. It's like you only have like certain panels and imagery to kind of, you really have to kind of like commit fully to kind of make this jump to the reader, or to the viewer. On a show, you don't need to be excessive about it because it's already there. So you
have to kind of tone it down a little bit to kind of leave room for people to kind of walk through the door, and that's Jeffrey Dean Morgan in a nutshell. That's
what he's done. He's toned it down, and also like they've had to tone it down just because they have no other choice. I mean, in the comic book, Negan is incredibly vulgar, and I mean, like he doesn't say on the show nearly half of the kind of things that he says in the comic just because it's AMC. And you just can't get away with saying some of that stuff.
Yeah, they can only say the F word so many times.
I know.
Or
I
the
think
S
it's
word.
Well, the F word. I think that they said that they can get away with saying the F word, but they're only allowed 3 times a season. I don't know why 3, but apparently it's a certain number. I don't know what kind of formula or algorithm allows them to decide.
Cable
that
television, FCC
3
rules.
I find that so incredulous, though. Don't you find that kind of crazy, the idea that it's like, we're going to tightly regulate, the F word. However, we can see a character gets his brains bashed in front of everybody. I mean, like, sorry. But you know what I mean? It's
Good
like...
point.
Like,
or cut in half, right?
Like weird... Yeah. Like, I mean, to me, that is far more like if you want to regulate something... Yeah. If you want to regulate something, regulate that. I mean, obviously, like, we're all adults here and that's fine. But I'm like, I would much rather somebody say, you know what? The violence is on another level. If somebody were like, maybe I should be toned down a little bit, which they did when the Glenn and Abraham episode happened, I get it. I get it. I'm not saying that like, oh my God, yes, we have to change everything, but I understand where they're coming from because yes, it was very, very intense. The F word, really?
Yeah,
like,
by
comparison, that's small potatoes based on like, I mean, that's nothing compared to what they've shown on that show.
Yeah, and even taking away some of the gratuitous violence and gore and all that stuff, let's just go to even the psychological possible damage that the show can do. It really forces people to confront really difficult topics, really difficult concepts like having to be thrust into certain situations. Just the idea of Rick having to bite that guy's ear off in the
oh God, yeah.
The
cleamers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, see, there you go. And so having to be forced in those situations where that's a possibility and having kids either cheer it on or be horrified, or not kids, but like, young adults. Yeah. I don't think this is a kid show necessarily, but
it should.
But yeah, these are high concepts like the way Emily Kinney died, even death in itself is very confrontational and to have children watch that forces a conversation, makes people think about death in ways that may not be true to life.
If you're letting your kids watch this show, I'm giving you a side eye as a parent. As a fellow parent, I'm giving you the major side eye.
But isn't that like the whole reason why swearing is kind of taboo, is because the off chance that you have children watching? It's not really a matter of austerity. It's
don't know. Is that where it comes from? Is that
I have to assume. Yeah. Because it's like network television. There's a chance that they have access to network. See, we don't even have access to network television anymore across the country other than through cable services. And so even then, does the rule even apply anymore? I mean, we do have HD antennas where we can get local channels now, but how many people do you know have an HD antenna? I can count maybe 2 people that I know of, So the rules are completely different now.
Interesting. I mean, I just know that open the door. I just know that for me, when The Walking Dead is on, and as soon as like it starts getting close and they start putting that warning before the show actually starts, First of all, the TV gets turned on in the bedroom. The children are in another room being taken care of by my mother, and the door is locked. There's nobody coming in there to see what goes on. No way. Well, like, there is no way. No, you're not seeing any of this. No.
Yeah.
I think even Jeffrey Dean Morgan said there was some sort of Comic-Con.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know what it was. It was one of those conventions or whatever. And
he has young children, basically.
He has young children, or he has at least one young children that must be 7 or 8 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there was a kid at one of these conventions asking him a question. He was like, "Where are your parents?
What are you doing here?"
Yes, he's like, no, you don't watch this. Hell no.
Yeah. No, but I will say one thing: if this kid is watching it, and he is watching it with his parents, I mean, I can deal with that. I'll tell you why. Because it's have your parents there means that you can talk to them about these things, or hold it. You're with your parents, you feel safe. There's that alone, having the tactile feedback from your parents, that sort of thing.
True.
And to be able to explain certain things, like why did he do this, or why did he do that, or why why did he feel the need to bash Glenn's brains in twice? I know. Having a parent around while you're watching it is kind of okay, you're both appreciating the show, but at the same time you're hopefully learning why this is wrong, why this is happening, in an unideal world, and to know that there could be some connections that could be made to reality that we can ease you through, which, I mean, eventually that you're going to have to do this with your kids too, Carol.
I know. It's going to happen. I'm avoiding it for as long as possible.
Yeah, and I hope you do, because I think it's important for parents to ease children into certain shows too.
Yes.
Something that I didn't have, and I think having.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of with me. We grew up in tight quarters, so there wasn't really all that much room for privacy. Yeah, and I know that Friday nights were, it was sort of the exciting thing is I would go to Blockbuster with my dad, and it's you got to pick out a movie, and he got to pick out a movie, and there was usually one that was more for the adults and one that was a little bit more, obviously family friendly or whatever. But yeah, I remember certain movies, it was we were kind of put in our room to play with the door closed. It's nope, you're not coming out. I think specifically one time it was Silence of the Lambs specifically. Oh. It's no, y'all are staying in there.
Now that we're on this, has there been a moment where you kind of sat and watched an iffy movie together with your parents?
Oh, God, I'm trying to think. I'm sure there has. What the thing is that my parents, my mother specifically, is not a huge movie person. So she really isn't as big into watching movies as much as my dad is. My dad loves movies. So I've watched more movies with him, but I'm trying to think if there was any movie I've ever seen with him that was uncomfortable.
Well, not uncomfortable, but had on the line or even over the line kind of content where you watched it together. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember watching, do you remember Dick Tracy growing up?
Yes.
The live action Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty?
Yeah, with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening.
Yeah, do you remember how kind of almost dark that was?
It was dark.
I remember watching it with my dad in the movie theaters, which is, I kind of think back and I'm like, what happened to me and my dad? But we watched Ghostbusters 2 together. We watched, which also was kind of frightening too.
Yeah.
And then Dick Tracy, which dealt with some dark stuff, some kind of stuff that kind of stuck with me for a little while.
Yeah.
But to have him there, what kind of made me feel really, first of all, safe, and knowing that look, me and my dad, we didn't really talk about these things until I was a teenager.
Oh yeah.
I was a little younger, but
this is the way it was during that time.
Yeah. But I did have that, I did have the tactile, the sense that he was there, and
no, for sure. I don't think that, especially if I think about the movie. Well, if I think about the movies that were a little bit rougher, it was never movies that I watched on my own. It's
you saw Saw with him together, right?
Yeah. No, I still have not seen any of those, and I don't want to.
No, I don't. I saw the first one, and I was just kind of I don't want to see the second or third or fourth one. No, this has been done.
No.
We saw the prince, the dude from The Princess Bride.
We saw Terminator 2. That was a little testy.
There you go.
In terms
That's
of
a good
content,
one.
If I think about it, hey, your man is in that movie, Terminator 2.
Wait, Xander Berkeley?
Yes, he's the father who got killed by the evil Terminator.
That's right. Holy
that
crap!
Was him. Yeah.
He looked so young. Oh my God!
Yes, but that was many years ago. Which
he had
is
color in his hair.
Yes.
And skinny too, much skinnier.
We is old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
He looks way sexier now.
You know
Come
what
on.
though? No, you know what though?
Be on the same page on this.
I agree completely. Like, because he looks. If I think about Terminator 2 and I think of him, I mean, he was kind of like a doofus. Like, he was sort of like, you know, you were kind of like, okay, he got killed. Well, you know, like you weren't. It wasn't really like
obviously,
it wasn't like a big loss, you know. But now I think he's definitely he's. But this is the thing, and I say this before, you guys have it so damn good. Like I'm sorry, like this is going off on a tangent, but you do. You guys can get older, and like it suits you. It does. It's like you're goofy as hell when you're younger, and then it's like you grow into this like mature older man stature, and it works. But it works. It's like you don't have to do anything really. You know, you just have to allow yourself to grow and age in a dignified manner. You know, and
the ability to, if you qualify that a little bit more, because
like, you know, the worst that I've always seen is when people fight it. When people fight it, whether it's man or woman, it's sort of like just stop.
It just doesn't look good.
It's not a good look. I've seen it on both sides, and it's sort of like it's something looks off. It just doesn't look right. Whereas the people who like comfortably grow into it and own it, it's amazing. As long as you own it, you know.
But to further your point, like men have the ability at least to kind of embrace it faster and also be comfortable with it faster, you know, and which could lend to the way they look and how they come off, you know.
The perception.
Yeah. Because I mean, personal perception and projection is kind of reality too, right?
And that's not just Xander Berkeley. I mean, it's like there's a ton of like actors that you could say the same thing. I mean, like nobody was going crazy for George Clooney when he was, you know, on Golden Girls, you know, and was like, it's true. Nobody was like losing their mind.
So goofy, right?
So goofy, you know. It's like
a young comedian.
Yeah, you know, like it was completely different. You know, that happens all the time. Yeah,
I feel that way now.
How we got on this.
I'll tell you what, just to put a bookend in, you know, to bookend this conversation, it's like it wasn't until I was 30 that I really fully embraced, first of all, change, like attitude, health changes. I'd already lost, you know, enough hair to kind of try to be okay with it. And then I was, you know, it took me a little while, but only a small while. And then I was just like, okay, this is it. This is what's happening. And I'm like truly my best self now. You know, it's like, that's what I feel.
And that's the thing. And it's very interesting, the perception about that, because like some people can view it as like, I've had people who think that I'm super confident, and in my mind, I don't think I'm super confident. I feel like I just don't care. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like you don't care anymore what other people think. Like, you're not too bent out of shape of like, oh, well, this person's going to think this, or maybe this. Like, no, you just don't care. But from a perception standpoint, some people view that as being confident. It's very interesting.
Right. Yeah. But you know what? That's a good thing to kind of embrace. And it kind of all comes back to Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Like, he does own it. He owns it enough and it's good that he's simultaneously being faithful to the comic, but also making a believable aged. I mean, he's not exactly spring chicken.
No.
He's not exactly this huge jacked up dude who through force, you know, just by sheer intimidation alone. He really reinvents I mean, not he, but I mean, it's writers, it's a combination of that.
But he sells it. You know, he sells it, and I think he's done a good job of kind of, you know, making this character his own interpretation, and he's done a good job with it, you know.
Fully, I agree fully with that. Based on what you've lent alone in terms of comic knowledge, I would probably be way more satisfied with the Negan that we have now as opposed to the one in the comics. It's just way more believable. It makes more sense to me.
And spoiler alert, I don't think that Negan is going anywhere in the mid-season finale.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, everything points to him being key to keeping people alive in some senses.
Yep,
you know?
I don't think.
In spite of everything, which we may see next week, or next week in a few days.
Right, I know, right. But yeah, like when people are like, oh, you know, is Negan gonna die? I'm like, don't hold your breath on that. That ain't happening. I mean, there is the camp of people that feel like something could happen to Daryl.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in that camp too.
You think so? You think something could potentially happen to Daryl?
Yeah. I do.
I think it's a long time coming. I don't know if they'll do it, but I do. In my mind, I feel like it's a long time coming that something should, because again, he's not in the comic, so he really doesn't affect the storyline in any which way if we're going to go by that logic. But also, I mean, he's been on this sort of Rambo, sort of reckless crusade, and how long are you going to be able to keep that going before it bites you?
Right.
To yourself. I mean, your reckless behavior already got Glenn killed. Yes, Negan killed him, but your reckless behavior didn't help. Your reckless behavior in terms of storming this truck into the sanctuary is going to give them an outing to be able to escape and come to Alexandria. Like, how many times can, this stuff happen and you are able to walk away fairly unscathed,
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up, because maybe this is his way of trying to make it right, but in doing so, he just keeps falling into the same traps, and in a weird moral or ethical way, it's like you should have just left your chips on the table, stopped while you were ahead.
So what do you think potentially would happen to Daryl then?
I mean, I still stick with the Dwight idea, is that I think in the effort of trying to end Dwight, I mean, for all I know, the Tara might get hurt, not killed, but hurt as a result of a confrontation with Dwight, but Daryl is the one that ends up getting killed, and it'll be in a way that we can accept Dwight in a way to the community, like Daryl tries to go too far. No, it's true, because I think people are already at that point with Daryl, like, what are you doing, like that. It's sort of like you've been reckless for quite some time, right? And I don't think that it's that Dwight kills him. I won't say that, but I think maybe something happens to where Daryl gets himself killed somehow, or something happens to Walker, maybe,
in trying to get to Dwight.
Exactly. So I don't think it would be that Dwight ends him, but I do think, if you want me to put a fine point to this, it's going to be a choice between going after Dwight and letting it be, and he chooses to not let it go, and that's what gets him killed.
And that'll be his downfall. Yeah.
That's honestly what I think, and that's probably the most precise prediction I've ever had.
That's very probable. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's all very probable. I will be texting you on Sunday. As this thing is going on.
Going up my Facebook Messenger, man.
and watch us both be wrong, and it's Heath in a helicopter.
Hey man, I'm happy to be wrong as long as it's right.
Yeah,
Morgan.
You're wrong as long as it's right.
As long as it's right. Do right by me with The Walking Dead. Do right by me.
Do right by me. Give me something to remember for the next couple of months.
Daryl, give me strength.
Give me strength. Jeez.
So I think no better way to end off 2 hours and 45 minutes, probably 2 hours and 15 minutes edited, with saying thank you for listening to Squawking Dead. You can reach us at squawkingdead.com. Reach all of our social media and ways to listen to the show, either directly by the website or using Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, all these different subscription services. Email us, squawkingpodcast@gmail.com. And with that, we wish you a good weekend. We're going to watch the 90-minute episode, and we're going to unpack that sucker over the course of maybe either the same week, or we may even take the time to post it the week after, because there may be a little bit of a hiatus between now and Fear the Walking Dead. I hope so that Carol can catch up. And with that, we bid you adieu until the next one.
See you next time.
Take care, y'all.